want to thank all of our moderators who have agreed to come here today. Alyssa Billfield, Jay Glass, Gay Chandler, and Gary Nabhan here. And this workshop was Gary's idea. And Tucson City of Gastronomy was the perfect organization to partner with on this workshop, because we have been doing a series of these types of workshops for heritage foods entrepreneurs for the last 3 years. This is actually the 6th workshop, but it's the first one that has focused on marketing strategies. So we've got some great speakers today on the panels, and I think it's going to be really a rich conversation. And I'm going to ask Gary to come up here and say a couple of words. And I want to thank him for his sponsorship for this program. And I want to thank the McGuire Center for Entrepreneurship. Is Mark Peterson here? Well, he should be here later. So, Gary.
Thank you all for coming. And just remember that we're in conversation with another 20, 25 people at minimum online. So there's going to be a multiplier effect of what we do today that may not be apparent in this room. I want to thank both Jonathan and Carlos for pulling us through on the logistics, and Gay Chanler in particular from Flagstaff, who has done heritage workshops up there and worked with Slow Food on all of its regional heritage foods. But I also want to remind you that this is about 20 years since the local food movement and heritage foods exploded on the scene. There were about 5 books, including one from Michael Pollan, one from Joan Gassau, I won't keep on naming them, that came out in 2001. And I remember September 2001 because my little Coming Home to Eat book came out the same day as 9/11. So people didn't see it until the next year. But there's really been an explosion of interest. And what you're hearing today is really the gleanings of, I think, some hard-won lessons about how to do heritage foods right in a way that is profitable for producers, restaurateurs, caterers, and pleasurable to all our consumers. In other words, getting that balance right has taken years to figure out. Of course, there were people like Janos Wilder, who was already doing this well before 2001. I think before he had a horse cart taking local foods around downtown Tucson, he had a stone cart with unicorns doing it. So there are people in this room that have been doing this for a long time, and we hope there'll be dialogue between all of you to learn from each other. And just my gratitude to each and every one of you for what you do and what you bring to this meeting. So, and particular thanks to Jonathan. We partnered on about a dozen different harebrained schemes over the years, and the opportunity to have the only city of gastronomy that's linked to a national heritage area, the Santa Cruz Valley National Heritage Area, something that I think our whole region can be proud of. So back to you, Jonathan.
Thanks. And I'm going to ask our first panelist and our moderator to come up. And Professor Alyssa Billfield, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. But we have collaborated on all of the workshops up until now, and it's just been a great partnership. And I've really enjoyed getting to know Alyssa, and she knows a lot. And I think you're going to enjoy her panel here.
Thank you. That was too kind and a little bit too much, but I'm really happy to be here with you all. Like Jonathan said, this is my last week as a lecturer at the McGuire Center. I have a lot of midterms that I need to grade after this wraps up. And my background and training is in public health nutrition and food systems, and also entrepreneurship, which is a pretty unique intersection. I've done practitioner-oriented work, and I also do a lot of research with food entrepreneurs, and I kind of follow them around and just like to listen to their stories. So I was really pleased to be able to be here as a moderator to share with you two, of some of the stories you'll hear today from our amazing local food entrepreneurs. So let's welcome Adam Krantz of Monsoon Chocolates and Gary Chavez of the San Javier Co-op, who will be part of our first panel today. Yes, thank you. And thanks to everybody who's joining us online. We'll do our best to coordinate with the chat to make sure if you have any questions for our panelists that you're able to get in there. Oh, perfect. Okay, so welcome. We're here. We're mic'd. We're ready to go. We're socially distanced and excited to share with you all. So the first panel today is, I think, we couldn't ask for a better title for the first panel, which is linking culture, ingredients, and process in your story. So just out of curiosity, has anyone attended any of these workshops in the past and you're coming around for a second or third or maybe fourth try? Okay, awesome. And we may have some folks online as well. So we always covered a lot of diverse topics in those, but there was always a focus on sustainability, and not just environmental sustainability when we talk about heritage foods, but also the social and economic aspects of sustainability. And so I think this panel topic is particularly important because we're really looking at that. So what I'd like to do first is introduce our awesome panelists here and let them kind of share their 30,000 foot view story of the amazing organizations that they represent and how they're connected to Tucson and this broader movement. And then what I'd like to do is look at each of these words as topics of conversation. So what does it mean to link your ingredient to culture? Can you share with us more about the ingredients and why they're important? And then your process. What is your process? So here we have Gary. Gary, you didn't know this, but I put together a couple images from the San Javier Co-op to provide a backdrop for you while you share a bit more about your story. So welcome.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me? Good morning. My name is Gary Chavez. I'm the administrative manager for the San Javier Cooperative Farm. I've been employed with the co-op for about 3 years now. To give you a little introduction to the co-op, we have dual management at the San Javier Cooperative Farm. I myself handle pretty much everything inside, and we just recently hired a farm manager who pretty much handles everything outside. So if you can kind of get that perspective. But at the San Javier Cooperative Farm, we've been there in operation for, over 30 years. What does that mean? Basically, as Autumn, I am Autumn, Don Autumn. We're located on the San Javier District. The San Javier District is one of 11 districts within the Don Autumn Nation. If you kind of look at Cells, which is about 60 miles west of Tucson, as kind of our capital, if you will. Cells there, and then it's comprised of 11 districts. And again, San Javier being one of those districts. So specifically talking about San Javier, that we kind of identify the San Javier district as a farming community. 4,000 years of farming, So we definitely have a rich history and culture when it comes to foods. What type of foods do we have? We have our wild foods and then foods that are rich in culture here in the Southern Arizona, Sonora Desert. And so going back to the farm itself, we have operations of alfalfa. That's kind of our cash crop, if you will. Right now, we are in our 6th cut. The monsoon season really had a wet one, but we also had a drought. So that's affected us tremendously when it comes to our alfalfa operation. We do have our operators who cut and maintain the fields, harvest the fields of alfalfa. We have food production. Again, 4,000 years of farming. We have a food production team that deals in heritage foods. And then we also have our admin team as well as our store. I don't know if any of you have been out there to our store. Things are changing at the farm. So we're looking at changing up the store. We're also not only in farming, but of course in ranching. You know, we use cattle for our fields. That's a big operation that we're going to be looking to in the near future. And then more recently, we have our catering department. So the importance of marketing, the importance of that type of strategy to introduce our heritage foods to the general public, the greater public, and come at a different perspective. You know, as Autumn, we have our traditional foods that's been passed down from generation to generation when it comes to our 60-day corn, when it comes to our flour. But now we're looking into catering, and our catering staff has a real perspective on different types of food. You know, vegetarian and vegan food is very popular right now. Tamales really weren't a staple of Autumn way back when, but now we're dealing with Jordan tamales. Jordan being the, what is Jordan? Choya buds, yes. I mixed my Autumn up with my English. Choya bud tamales. We were out at the Tucson Meet Yourself, and our Jordan bud tamales had some jalapeno in there, green chili with the Jordan, the Choya buds, and it was into a tamale, and they were very popular. Some of the different items we had at the Tucson Meet Yourself was mesquite cookies, and we had chumit that was made from the mesquite flour. So we incorporate all of our heritage foods and ingredients into our dishes with the catering department. We started the catering department about 2.5 years ago. COVID didn't help, so we kind of put that on the back burner, but it gave us time for our cooks to introduce new foods. And so definitely excited, U of A being one of our partners that utilizes our catering, and we're really excited. And to give a real quick plug, we will be out at Casino del Sol's Tamale Festival. That's happening early December. So we'll definitely have tamales out there. If you guys want to come by and say hello, we'll have a booth out there. That's pretty much it.
Excellent. Okay, thank you for sharing. And thank you for that great introduction. And I could already see kind of eye movements. We've all gotten really good at reading the upper part of the face in the last year and a half. So I see a lot of lights going off that I'm sure, we'll get to hear about when we move into the kind of discussion part of this. So thank you so much, Gary, for sharing. We're going to move to Adam Krantz, who is the founder of Monsoon Chocolates. So Adam, here's your background.
Ooh, thank you. In 2017, I came back to Tucson. I was living in Portland, Oregon at the time. I have a long history in Tucson. I pretty much grew up here, got my start in the culinary industry here. Previously, I worked at the Food Conspiracy Co-op as a buyer. I was the grocery manager at Time Market. And I had become heavily involved in this budding kind of renaissance of craft chocolate making that had really just started to pick up speed about 10 years ago. I was involved in the industry mostly as a retailer, and then as things evolved and I became pretty certain that I wanted to start my own chocolate company, I knew that I wanted to come back to Tucson to do it. Mostly because I consider Tucson home. I love it. Nobody at the time was doing anything with chocolate. And I felt like there was a real opportunity to introduce Tucson to this bean to bar movement. And I also thought that out of all the ingredients available in the entire world, I was most attracted to our local native ingredients. And I thought that they would pair really beautifully with chocolate. So the company was started in 2017. We manufacture chocolate from the cocoa bean. So we work with about a dozen cocoa growing communities around the world. We have direct sourcing partnerships. So we source the beans directly from them. We receive them in our factory. We control the entire process in-house. Beyond making chocolate, we do a lot of things. We're operating a cafe, we're operating a web store. So we're simultaneously a local brand or a local cafe, if you will. And we're also a nationally distributed chocolate brand. We have this pretty expansive bonbon program where we feature flavors and ingredients from the Southwest. We like to have fun. There's just this incredible arrangement of ingredients locally. And so we purchased the mesquite flour from the co-op. We refine it into a mesquite white chocolate. We have a blue corn white chocolate. We use prickly pear and chiltepine peppers. So I never really thought of it as a marketing opportunity. I really thought about it more from a creative perspective, just beautiful ingredients that we really want to work with. But as we've been operating our business, we have been really fortunate to get a lot of good press because of the City of Gastronomy designation, because we're using ingredients that are becoming more, I guess, people are becoming more aware of them on the national level. A lot of that is due to the designation and the hard work of the City of Gastronomy.
Excellent. Okay, so I have kind of my professor hat on now. And I have a question because Adam, what you said really resonated with me. I do a lot of research looking at different value chains in the food system, alternative value chains, they're often called. And what really rises to the top from all of the research that's done out there on this is exactly what you said, which is that a lot of these kind of small local food systems really rely not necessarily on marketing as we would traditionally think about it, or as selling in the kind of, business school hat perspective, but more relationship building and also storytelling. And so what I'd love to hear you all reflect on, if you have any opinions, is maybe your story about how that process has worked for you, both relationship building within the community for the purpose of ultimately, selling and marketing your product using the business terminology. And also, if you could touch on how you've sort of focused on culture, whether that's the kind of broader Southwestern culture or the specific culture of the Tohono O'odham. I think that that may be a good opening question to then turn it over to our audience.
I guess, let's see. A thought that comes into my mind is, we're very cautious with what we do and how we present the ingredients that we use. I know that I'm a white entrepreneur, and so the last thing I want to do is tread on greenwashing or cultural appropriation. We try to be very, so like you mentioned, storytelling. I think we view it more as truth telling for us. We're not trying to tell a story. We're just trying to honestly represent the ingredients that we use. We're really trying to stay clear of cultural appropriation and trying to lean more towards appreciation. And so we made a lot of decisions about how we would present our products and how we would not present our products. And so we're very cautious about the language, the imagery that we use, and very focused on giving credit where credit is due.
That's great. And I'm curious from a process perspective, because a lot of folks who are attending may already be at some stage of kind of business incubation. Can you share some best practices around how you've gone about that?
Yeah, I kind of have trouble answering that because I think it's like a fundamental perspective for us. You know, we just being in the chocolate industry, this is an industry that is really steeped in problematic, labor practices along the supply chain. It has a deep, deep history of colonialism. And so one of the focuses of our brand was to take something that is universally beloved, like chocolates. You know, our goal is to make people happy. We want to create experiences. We'd like to weave a little bit of education into the process. And so the goal was, how do we take something that makes people happy and make sure that there's no darkness along the supply chain, along the marketing efforts. So it was really fundamental in the way that we founded the company. So I don't know that we have, it's not like we have a rule book that we use. I think we mostly follow along our own moral compass and just try to stay humble and try to stay honest.
Excellent. And would you say like you coordinate at any point in time with folks that you source from on the messaging? Is that part of what you've tried to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So we like to get feedback. Anytime we're going to make a statement about a farm that we partner with or a source, we'll send that copy to them and say, is this accurate? Does that actually resonate for you? Are we missing anything?
That's great. That is it seems really simple to you because like you said, it's kind of embedded in how you do business, but that's a really simple, practical tool that I think folks can use to make sure that you're honoring, especially the producers that are creating the products that go into value-added ingredients. Gary, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this topic.
Thank you. Our heritage foods it's life. You know, it's history, it's culture. How can we market that? You know, so we are in a position to where for generations, our food, our survival has been handed down. So I appreciate what Adam has to say, you know, when it comes to marketing. As a culture, these foods, the wild foods of the Southwest desert, the prickly pear, the mesquite, the choram, choya buds, you know, all of those foods that are from the desert provide for us as a culture. We have 60-day corn, you know, we have the tepary bean. All those ingredients were survival for us as autumn. And it's not until recent that, you know, we've realized that there is a market out there. There is the ability not to look at, say, the dollar sign, but to share our culture, to share our history. And our main goals, one of our main goals is to provide for the community. Operating a 900-acre farm and providing food for the community doesn't pay the bills, you know, so we definitely have to look from a different perspective. You know, coming from as autumn, you know, it's a business. We've had to look at that and say, okay, as a business, you know, we have equipment that needs to be out there plowing the fields. We need staff to harvest the fields. We need education for our autumn. We employ about 60% of autumn, and it's only until recently where we've really tried to include youth bringing the youth in, because as you know, much of, I think for everybody's culture, we're losing the culture due to the young people. You know, everybody has a phone and video games and texting, you know. As Autumn, we like to sit under the tree and share stories and share our recipes. And so we're trying to get back to that, involve the community, but not only that, but that bigger market, if you will. So for us to be able to share our foods and to look at how different foods are using our products, and to be able to share that, you know, with the Tucson Meet Yourself, you know, with the different casinos, you know, with the different businesses, and to be able to share our ingredients creates revenue for us. So that's something that for us is new. We did have a marketing person. That position is open if you are all interested. But, you know, we've had to look at different ways of selling online. It wasn't until recently that we have an online store now. Much of our product is shipped to the East Coast. And you know, what do they know about Southern Arizona, Sonora Desert heritage foods? That's where we have an opportunity to share. And again, for us as Autumn, it's more of providing and sharing, but there definitely is a market out there. So we're definitely tapping into that. Again, having our marketing person. Branding is very important to us. That's something that we haven't got a hold of yet, but we're definitely in that direction. With the casinos, both Desert Diamond and Casino del Sol, they're very interested in our products. They do, I think, manage within each respective casino about 4 or 5 different restaurants. And they're looking at our heritage foods and wanting to put them on the menus and share them with their customers. But we're not there yet. Our food production has a staff of 3. You know, you see on TV fields, acres and acres of fields where you have, you know, 20, 30 employees harvesting the fields. We're not there yet. You know, right now we operate about 35 acres of our traditional, well, I should say our foods, which would be the 60-day corn, the temporary beans, our autumn peas. We need to increase staff. We need to increase the products that we share with the community and the general and the public in general. We have the buyers. We definitely have an opportunity to tap in, to share our foods. You know, grateful that Adam's here because I finally got to meet him. But yes, we do have his products in our store, and they're great, wonderful products. So again, that's the direction we're headed. But again, you know, it's life for us as Autumn. That's where we start at.
Amazing. Gary, thank you so much for sharing. And this has been a really rich discussion. 2 kind of high-level insights I've taken from this has been this idea of a truth-telling from Adam. So we can think about, you know, less marketing, more truth-telling. Especially as it relates to you know, giving credit where it's due along the supply chain. And then from Gary, this idea of sharing, right? So yes, you are selling ultimately, and you know, San Javier Co-op runs a business that has, you know, huge demand. But you know, the intention that you shared is so really authentic, that the goal is to share and to educate. And I know that that's a huge part of the goal of the Tucson UNESCO City of Gastronomy. So we do have some minutes now to capture questions from the audience here and also online if we're able to check in with the chat. And maybe, should we go around with a microphone for folks? Okay, awesome. So we'll alternate between live and Zoom. So why don't we start with live folks? Does anyone have a question that you'd like to pose to the panelists, or anything you'd like to add to the conversation?
Gary Rellenos, I have a question about how you're funded. Starting a farm, bootstrapping a farm from nothing and just trying to be able to build it organically, so to speak, from the ground up, is an extraordinarily difficult thing to do, particularly when you're trying to market products that nobody's ever heard about. What sort of support? Are you getting support from the community from that? What are the outside support, or if there is any, are you able to get to help you with your efforts?
So the question was, and I'll repeat it for folks online as well. The question was, Janos was saying it's been an amazing feat that we witnessed the San Javier Co-op accomplish over these last couple decades since the farm was started. And the question was, how have you reached out for resources along the way, both kind of support from the community, but also perhaps even, Janos, maybe you were getting it financial resources or technical assistance resources?
Thank you, Janos. We do have the ability to seek grants, and right now in agriculture, there's many grants out there that go unnoticed, I believe, and that's something that we at the co-op really have to take a look and tap into those grants. It's recently, within the last 5 years, we do have a cold storage. That's very important when you're operating a farm. But it's only been with us for about 5 years. Most recently, we have the mill, and it's been very difficult for us. It's completed, but yet we're still looking for a millwright, to get the education for our staff, to get the resources, to get the technical issues dealt with when it comes to the machinery within that mill. So we're definitely, I believe, at a loss for those types of resources. We do, again, seek the grants. We do work with the San Javier District and the Tohono Nation to get grant writers. It's important for us to have a grant writer of our own, but I think we need a grant to get a grant writer. At least that's what I always, jokingly say to the staff. We know there's resources out there. Most recently I had a meeting with the Tohono Nation, Raul Grijalva's office, and a gentleman from Washington, D.C. And we shared some of the same topics that we're discussing today, is what resources are out there for us. So definitely on the lookout. And Janos, our Mariah, our catering person, I think it's been 2 months that we had Mariah go out into the city of Tucson and say, hey, what kitchens can she get some experience? We're paraprofessionals. Most of our staff, haven't gone through, especially Mariah, haven't gone through culinary classes, education. So there's a lot of need for education and the importance of education, as well as on-the-job training. So Janos has been gracious enough to allow Mariah to tag along in his kitchens, and it's been very, very helpful. So we're always looking for that opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. And we're going to touch base here with our online audience to see if we have any questions that have come in. We don't have anything yet. Online folks, don't be shy. Is there anyone here that has a question that you're curious to ask? Maybe we'll take 1 or 2 more if there are any, and then we'll thank our amazing panelists. So the question is, just to repeat for the online folks, does San Javier Co-op have any wholesale customers?
We do when it comes to our alfalfa operation.
Food products.
Not the food products.
The reason I ask is because I think it was probably 15 years ago at a fascist store in Flagstaff, I bought these little pink beans. And I came to learn through Slow Foods, Arc of Taste, that there's a ton out of pink bean. And does that ring a bell with you? Is that something that
we have our red beans? Yes.
Yeah, they're little, small, roundish.
Yeah, I don't have any beans with me today, but I do have some peas and some show and tell. I like show and tell.
So, but none of these are all, where you sell them through your co-op?
Yes, we have a store there at the co-op, but to answer your question, no, we don't have any wholesale pricing or wholesale products, only because it's agriculture, it's farming. Like I said, the drought this year really impacted us, as well as the monsoon. So this year, our wild foods, our weehawk, our mesquite, our cholla buds, our prickly pear, We've had to let this year be what, as in autumn, what we call a rest year, where we're not going to harvest those type of foods only because the drought devastated so much of those foods, and animals as well, desert life as well. So there's a demand out there. We haven't tapped into it yet. And with our hay operation, we've planned for next year to be able to sell to the dairy farmers, the cattle farmers. We've only recently, with the new farm manager, been able to secure those relationships. And again, we talk a lot about resources. We need people in those positions to be able to do some outreach and share with everybody of what we can provide and when we can provide. So we do a lot of planning. So hopefully next year, we'll have bags of cholla buds, because that's very popular for us out of the farm.
Excellent. We've got one final question from Gary.
Yes, definitely.
Oh, so I'm just going to repeat the question for our online folks. Gary was asking Gary how foods from San Javier Co-op make it into institutional food environments like schools and senior living facilities.
Thank you for that question. We would definitely like better opportunities to do those things. What we have going now is with the Thon Autumn Nation, we have an outreach coordinator. That's been a position that's been around for about 4 months. So again, you can kind of get an idea of the direction we want to move in, but has been kind of an obstacle for us. That outreach coordinator will definitely go out to the nation, to different communities, different programs, and to be able to share our products. Again, having that vision of providing for the community is very important to us. So the elderly center at the Santa Fe district, we provide food, as well as some of the districts on the Thon Autumn Nation. Now, if they come to us and ask for donations or some assistance, we'll definitely consider that. And I think we've never turned anyone away. But when it comes to a marketing strategy and working with, say, Tucson Unified School District, working with the co-op on 4th Avenue, we haven't had the products in the past year. Again, the drought has devastated us. But those are all programs and businesses that we want to share our products with, and we definitely have an opportunity to do so. But with COVID has also put us back, a lot. So we're definitely on the right track to have those relationships be revisited, because that's what was lacking for the past, I say, year and a half. We are open pretty much for business when it comes to tours coming to the Santa Fe Cooperative Farm. We take each tour and look at what they want to gain from it. Like I said, a lot of U of A students come to the farm, and then also different businesses, as well as young folks. So we want to create some programs and some tours specifically designed for them. So there's a lot going on at the co-op.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing. And in the interest of time, because we certainly want to make sure the next group gets to share their knowledge, and then of course we don't want to get in the way of lunch. I'm gonna just ask Adam and Gary to share any kind of final insights of words of wisdom that they want to share with you all here in person and online, translating from their experience to kind of the, like Gary was mentioning, COVID obviously wreaked havoc with supply chains. What are the kind of opportunities that you see that exist now moving forward, to close on a positive note? And then I also just wanted to make a note that Gary brought in some show and tell items, which is great. So Gary, I don't know if you want to keep these on the table or pass them around.
No, I think up front
Okay,
would be best, right?
that sounds good.
Yeah, just take a look at it.
So we'll put them up on display for folks to check out. And it's a great opportunity to see how San Javier Co-op has shared their story. So to close, Adam.
I would say words of wisdom. I can't stress enough the importance of community, especially in contributing to local food systems. You know, for us, it's partnerships with the co-op or with Pivot Produce, local, whether it's cafes that we partner with to, you know, buy our coffee or to sell our chocolate to, who are using our chocolate in their programs. The local collaboration and community building is the one thing I could stress as being really important in growing sustainable food movements.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. And Gary, do you have something you want to add?
Just social media. I mean,
Yeah.
everything, you know, out there for marketing and businesses and even for ourselves is social media. We're so quick to just get online rather than picking up a phone, but definitely welcome you all to our social media, Santa Vera Co-op, Santa Vera Farms. What is our Santa Vera Co-op? Santa Vera, go check them out. Santa Vera Cooperative Association, Santa Vera Cooperative Farm is our Facebook. We do have an Instagram. And again, you know, trying to find a good marketing person to be able to promote Instagram. You know, a lot of the younger folks like Instagram. We don't have Twitter yet, but we'll definitely look at that. And then also just come by the farm. You know, like I said, we do have a store. So our marketing strategies, as you all know, it's very important for any type of business. And then of course, like Adam had said, community is also important. And we definitely have our those opportunities. So please become a part of it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I know it's been inspiring to see how, you know, individual consumers and also businesses have really banded together over the pandemic to help support each other, you know, to make sure that these, you know, humans and also their businesses that we love are able to, you know, thrive, even amidst all these challenges. Yeah, it's been super inspirational. So looking forward to see what happens as this local food ecosystem grows. And without further ado, let's give a round of applause to Adam and also Gary for sharing their time. They're both super busy folks, so we're lucky to have them here. And I will pass it along to Jonathan, who is gonna introduce the next group.
Thanks. That was interesting, and I hope you guys stick around because would like to talk to you more, and I'm sure others here would. And so if you have the time. So our next panel is going to be moderated by Jay Glass, and Jay is a board member of Tucson City of Gastronomy and a marketing professional, and he was the right person to ask to moderate this upcoming panel, and I'm not going to cut into their time. So Jay, come on up, please, and the panelists.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome. Warm welcome for myself to everybody here and everybody that's online. And we're really honored today to have these two luminaries from the Tucson food community with us. I'd like to introduce Don Guerra from Barrio Bread and Todd Martin from Tucson Tamales. So we're going to be talking. Needed to find the right computer there. So today we're going to be really looking at where marketing and heritage ingredients come together. So since we have these gentlemen who have these very successful businesses, we're going to first explore a bit about how they got into business and where heritage ingredients entered into the equation for them and their business. And then we're going to kind of as their business has grown, we're going to kind of bring it up to today and kind of drill into some of those areas. And then finally, we'd love to have some Q&A from the audience. So first, I'd like to introduce Don and hi, Don. So Don has really, he is very well known here and his product is just amazing. But he's also really developed a national reputation. He was nominated for a James Beard Award. And so we're really happy to have him here today. So Don, we wanted to start and just kind of get an idea of, for you, when you started, I believe you started in your garage.
Started in my garage.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little
Classic
about
story.
that? Like, because especially for a lot of people here, they are just starting out. So like, give us your sort of startup story.
Yeah, you know, been a baker for 31 years, and I had my first bakery when I was 25 years old. I'm 51 now, and you know, every moment of the journey has just been, it's been like the best. I never get tired of what I do. I love it, you know, every single day. But in 2009, I was a bakery owner in Flagstaff in Ashland, Oregon. I had a company called The Village Baker. I sold the company. I missed Tucson so much. I had to get back to the Southwest, and I enrolled in the College of Ed. I thought I got to change gears, do something different. Still on. And I thought education was the way to go for me, because I feel like I lost some of my business because I wasn't proficient and clear and didn't have expertise to train staff. And because I have a craft business, as Adam knows, there's that passion. You have to be able to communicate what you do first to let them develop some skill, proficiency, expertise, hopefully, and then that passion. And I was lacking that. So the College of Ed, I'm proud to say, College of Ed grad, the best thing I've ever done in my life, probably after studying anthropology, where I had known Gary. We go way back. But that was really a pivotal moment for me. It was tough, but in 2008, I wanted to retire from teaching. It was the worst time to borrow money, right? The crash. There was no SBA loans. So I thought, I have to do things differently. I've been traveling Mexico, all over Europe, looking at bakeries. I've seen those bakeries where they're sort of that front of the house is that retail. And then you look through that hallway, you see, you know, your Nana and Tata out there sitting on the couch. I'm like, I'm going to do that. So I turned my house into a bakery, fully functioning. It was licensed through the College Food Law of Arizona. I did it rogue for 1 year, I'll be honest. But I was proud of that. So that was really the start of Barrio Bread. And I went with my dad's lessons of don't borrow money. Don't try to buy something you can't afford. So I'm proud to say, you know, I have 4 businesses now and I have no debt. It's my entrepreneurial goal, my father's lessons. So going forward in a big way. But yeah, the garage taught me a lot. I was one person. I made 375,000 loaves over 8 years. I became a bread monk. I don't recommend it, but it was what I needed to do it and just establish a strong foundation in the community, going from education to being this baker. And I used outreach education. I used everything I have in my past. So I was a cultural anthropologist studying food systems, how food travels one place to another, cultural adoption, preserving cultural foods. That taught me a lot, combined it with education. And of course, 31 years of baking experience. My model for Barrio Bread, it is not just a bakery. It is a culture. It is a food innovation center, a bread innovation center, where everything I do is transparent to the community. And my community is local, national, and international. That is my community. I've had that chance to teach, going, you know, with City of Gastronomy around the world teaching. And that is my passion. So that's really the foundation of my business is outreach education, sharing the knowledge, creating knowledge networks to support the bakery.
Thank you. That is a lot of loaves.
Yeah.
What time were you waking up every day? Just out of
Oh, wow.
curiosity.
I had the craziest schedule. So on Saturdays, I do midnight. I did that like almost 8 years, waking up midnight Saturday, but it was labor of love. I probably worked 60 hours alone in my bakery. But through that, I did it the right way. But it was a life lesson. Perseverance. And that's really what it is about owning a business. You have to persevere. There's some lean times. Bootstrapping is the key here now, that do it right and don't give up. And if you have passion to back it, like you will never give up. You'll lay yourself on the tracks to save your business and to save your product. And that's what I do. It's all love.
Thank you. Thanks, Don. So Don, I wanted to ask you one more question in this section is about what point did you, I mean, you're coming where you had an established baking background. You traveled all around the world to see working and seeing how other bakeries were doing it. In terms of like using heritage grains here, was that something that you had in mind the whole time, or did the market caught up to you, or was it sort of like you met in the middle?
A little bit of everything. This is fascinating to me because when I was a baker, of years past, I would break open a bag of flour and I would say to myself, like, where does this come from? It's a material. I've been so curious, and it took until 2011 for that moment to happen. But I had always been fascinated looking at wheat fields, movies, whatever. This is where it comes from. It comes from a farmer, it comes from a land. Where is it? So it was probably 2010, 2011, and Gary and I had reconnected. He was also living in Flagstaff when I had my bakery when I was 25 years old. So we have that history, but we reconnected then, and he told me of a project that, of course, Native Seed Search, that is his baby, but also a grant, a SARE grant, Sustainable Agricultural Research Education grant through Native Seed Search. And he said, I really want you to be part of this. I've known you forever baking this bread, and this is really should be a moment for you too. Let's work together. So I became a test baker on the project. He grew some white Sonoran wheat and brought it to my garage. And it was coarsely milled. It was like we didn't know a lot back then, but what we knew, we were believers, like creating this local grain economy in Southern Arizona, especially with this man. He knew what he was doing. So he said, I need you to make bread with this. And it was like scary, exciting, and everything all combined. But I said, I think I can do it. So the next day, I did make bread, and I remember mixing the whole step of the way. It was like I was kind of shaking, and like I pulled the bread out of the oven, and it was like the aha moment. Like, this is it. This model that we're about to create, and we got, with the help of that grant to grow Chapalote corn and white Sonoran wheat. It was my aha moment. Like, this is on now. I've been waiting for years. And this is what Tucson is going to be. This is going to be my life. And I'm going to lay something down for Tucson beyond me. And I thought all those things right now. And then Gary came to pick up the bread, and we were like high-fiving a lot because we both knew, like, this is it, that we're going to change this. And through a lot of like seed preservation and collection with Gary, and with Native Seed Search to help market and promote it, we engaged other farmers in the community. So we held a couple sessions where we invited farmers to come in and said, would you grow this? If you do, we will give you the seed, which was Glenn Roberts, right? Donated, say, 2,000 pounds of seed to the farmers and said, this seed donation program, you grow it, yield it, you give us back the 2,000, and the rest is yours. Go forward with it. And so white Sonoran wheat created the model. It wasn't the perfect model because it's a soft white wheat, but it did have the best story for us to convince our community, the USDA, that we needed more. And so from there, I'm proud to say, like, I have 14 varieties of local grains that I use every day in my bakery. So it's gone from like 10% to like 100% sourcing local. And I built a food hub concept from it. And it was just from that opportunity that caught up to me, really, in a way that I was after it in a way, but also presented to me because of my background and connections in the community. So that's what Barrio Bread is right now. And like I said, I'm going to leave something behind that where we always have grain growing. We have people that know how to make the bread, and we have a distribution marketing system to make sure everyone in the community knows what they're eating. And so that's, to me, the most important, because if you get that community support like we have in Tucson, you have no problem with business because people want to see others doing good things. So I think we can all speak to that. Once you establish a person as that, transparent with your knowledge and your passion, and that shines through, then you really just need to do what you do best. Make bread and be part of the community.
Thank you. So I'd like to introduce Todd Martin now. And Todd is one of the co-founders with his wife, Sherry, of Tucson Tamale. And welcome, Todd.
Thank you.
And as I was preparing for today, I went to the Tucson Tamale website, and I've lived all around the country, and I was entering my address in Seattle. I was entering my address in Los Angeles, my friend's address in Boston. Tucson Tamale is in 3,500 locations around the country. So they are actually, anywhere you go, you could get Tucson Tamale. So it's a local company, but it's a huge national company. And we're going to talk a little later about how they're going to be expanding. But Todd, welcome.
Thank you.
And I'd love for you to be able to share about how you and Sherry started. I mean, because a tamale is like this humble, beloved food that, is often associated with holidays and celebration. So how did you guys start in terms of like, like what was the thought genus in terms of like making tamales,
Yeah.
especially since you've basically made it into a premium category?
Right. So my wife grew up making tamales. Her family, it was their family tradition. Every September, they would make green corn tamales. The chilies, they'd roast the chilies on the barbecue. They would shave the corn out by hand. Sherry likes to tell the story that life-changing events was when they got an electric knife and a Cuisinart. So when I moved to Tucson in '95 to be with Sherry, I became a part of that family tamale making tradition. In fact, I'd been here for about 2 weeks. I moved here in September, and Sherry said, "We're going to go to my mom and dad's on Saturday to make tamales." And I'm like, great. So I'm thinking we'll be there from 9 to 11 or 12. I show up, there's 20 people there, there's 5 bushels of corn and 5 cases of beer. And of course, it's an all-day event. And we made, who knows how many, 120 dozen tamales that day. So, fast forward a little bit. Sherry and I were both in tech, and we loved to cook. Her parents' health issues, and they left us. So we started looking around town for, we wanted to grate those tamales. Couldn't find anything. We started making our own. And before we even decided to start Tucson Tamale, we had an aha moment that we were making green corn tamales, and then we'd make some red chili beef tamales. And we're like, is that all there is? And we started looking at the history of tamales and realizing that every country in the Americas has their own tamale tradition. And so there's as many varieties of tamales as there are, people in the country. So what we realized is that a tamale was like a sandwich in the sense that anything you put in between 2 pieces of bread becomes a sandwich. Same thing with a tamale. Anything you can put in masa can become a tamale. And so we started making our own and realizing also that there wasn't anything premium out there. We were using organic corn, clean meats, clean cheeses. And we were both working at Intuit. And in January of 2008, we said, let's go into the tamale business. And even our friends, family, everybody thought we were crazy, especially but we would bring them over for lunch and we'd say, here's what we're thinking about doing. We would share it and they're like, oh my gosh, this is great. You need to do this. Of course, then in September that year, we signed it. For those of you who may know, we started over on Broadway and Tucson Boulevard. It was 1,000 square feet, hole in the wall. We signed a lease, and then 3 weeks later, the whole economy went to shit. So we were in. So we moved forward. We opened up in December of 2008. And, we grew the business from there, but we always stuck to our main principle was, we had to make a great tasting product and we had to use great ingredients. The other thing that we really fell in love with and why tamales was so important to us, it was Sherry's family tradition. But also when we started to look at tamales, the process of making masa starts with a process called nixtamalization. When you nixtamalize corn, it goes through, it's a simple a bath in a lime solution, an alkaline solution. That loosens up the hull so it washes off easily, and then it also makes the corn really easy to grind. It's also the only process that allows corn to be 100% bioavailable to you. So it's truly, in our personal humble opinion, it's the only way you should ever eat corn, even though we do use some whole kernel corn in some of our tamales. But the process of nixtamalization, the recorded history of it goes back over at least 5,000 years. So with all due respect to Monsoon, it's probably more recorded history on tamales than there is on chocolate. And we know how popular chocolate is, right? So we really just fell in love with the fact that this was truly an ancient food, and it was the first true convenient food also. We found stories of how when the hunters would go out and the gatherers, they would make tamales and they would carry them with them, and that's what the tamales would sustain them in their hunting adventures. So we had the place on Broadway. It just started doing phenomenal. We were getting great local press. We started getting national press. We expanded that location. We then opened up a second location, and we were selling wholesale here in Tucson and Arizona. We were sold in about 30 stores, and we were being sold in Sprouts. It was actually Sunflower, and then Sprouts bought them, and then Sprouts merged with another company. We were in 4 Sprouts in Tucson and 2 in Phoenix. And when they sold, new company said, we want all 300 stores to be the same in terms of their freezer doors, their sets. So the buyer came to us and he said, can you supply 300 stores? And we're like, no, we can supply 6. And he said, well, I'm going to have to, kindly, we love your product, but you can't be in our door. So about 2 months later, he calls us up and he said, I got a problem. And I said, what? And he's like, well, we're getting so many complaints from our customers that we're not selling your tamales. We need to solve this. So we actually bought these little freezers. But from there, we realized that we were onto something, beyond just Tucson. So we, in late 2015, we opened up a USDA, FDA manufacturing facility. It's over on Dragoon and Grant. That facility, the capacity is 5 million tamales a year. And this year, we're actually going to make almost 6 million out of there. So we're over capacity. We're opening up a second manufacturing facility over in South Tucson, keeping everything local from that perspective. And we've just found that around the country, people are really, it's not just, it's a great tasting product. They love the clean ingredients, but there's also I think the romance of, Mexican food is the second most popular food among all consumers in the US. The only one that's more popular is Italian food. And Mexican food is more popular than Chinese and steak and potatoes. So again, there's that. But tamales, nobody was really doing a premium tamale. And then we also did something different with making it a single serve. So it's very convenient. It's microwavable, it's ovenable. You can steam it on the stovetop. And again, just our getting out there and as Jay alluded to, we're in about 3,500 stores around the country right now, and that's continuing to grow. And then after we open our new facility, that's going to grow even further. So that's how we got started, and that's where we are today.
Thank you. That's a great story. So I'm curious, like you talk on your website, in that presentation you shared with me about perfecting the masa recipe in 2010. Maybe talk a little about that, because as all of you know that are developing food or have developed food products, I mean, you're dealing with chemistry, and especially when you're thinking about shelf life and food safety. So I'm just kind of curious, like maybe tell us a little about that perfecting the masa recipe, and also if there's any sort of layer of bringing in sort of that, thousands of years of history.
Yeah. So we also realize that the fillings are critical, but the masa is even more critical. I should say they're both critical. One complements the other. But we knew that we had to perfect our masa recipe. One thing that we didn't like about certain tamales that we tried was the masa was too dense. So and then we also didn't like lard. Not that we're vegetarians, we're carnivores, but we knew a lot of vegetarians and vegans. And so we wanted to make a masa that was really for everybody. So our first goal was, how do we remove the lard? And you have to have a fat source in your masa. And everybody said you couldn't make it with the liquid oil. We did figure out a way to make it with the liquid oil so that kept the fat source, but it was still we wanted it light and fluffy. And so what Jay's referring to is it took us, we considered our first 2009 and 2010 really a beta. So we were just trying to perfect our recipes. And the first one was the masa. We probably changed our masa recipe in the first 18 months. We probably changed it at least a dozen times. And every time it was a learning journey, right? We were keep trying to make it better. And what we ended up with was a lighter, fluffier masa. And one that also, steams really well, re-steams really well. All of our tamales are fully cooked and frozen. So when you get it home, you're either steaming it on the stovetop or microwaving it. And part of what we wanted with that masa was that when you do that, it's back to the way it was originally, not, something different. Like if you, I love burritos, and there's some phenomenal tortillas in this town. But you get that tortilla and you wrap it up and you put it in the freezer and then you put it in the microwave, and that tortilla just does not come back to life the way you want it to. That's what we wanted our masa to come back to life the way it's intended to. So that was really our main goal with that, all that development around that. And it's trial and error, a lot of trial and error.
Great, thank you. So Don, I wanted to, you talk a little about your business being like a circular economic model. So I was wondering if I've thought that was super interesting, and could you maybe explain that to everybody? And
yeah, so what I really wanted for my business is to create that circular economy model. So I was focused, of course, on the heritage component, preserving, traditions here, growing what can grow local, create opportunities from farmers to millers to bakers, distributors. Everyone involved in that grain chain was very important to me. But what was also important to me is the green side of the business. So sourcing from farmers 30 miles away, San Javier Co-op Farm, not far away, less than that, Hayden Flour Mills, like 100-mile radius. To me, that was one thing I really wanted to do, and a passion project for me, and a component that I really believed in. So keeping everything close. And it was also about the economics for me. I do have a love of economics and how to create the tightest system for my business, but also for my community, to keep the dollars local. So, these are the things that are important to me of why I do things the way I do them. And that's really goes back with Adam said, community, community first. And so, realizing that in 2008, 2009, Todd and I launched at the same time. Yeah. There wasn't the money. So you have to really look at things differently. And, that bootstrapping model, like both of us did, and where and how you spend your money was important. And then who's getting the money, and, exchange for that product. So really it was, to me, those things, Jay, that really inspired me to continue on this path. And that's kind of why I'm so committed to local. I do have now an established grain company, Barrio Grains, and proud to say that I'm on my 3rd USDA grant. And if I get this next one, the implementation for Barrio Grains, which should happen any day, and I'm dying because it should have been already, but it'll be almost $500,000 I've received from the USDA for my projects. So that's my background too, grant writing. To me, it's really important, and the USDA has funded my projects because of, who I am. I'm, Anglo Indigenous, I'm Yaqui, it's my Indigenous side. I want to make sure like we have these traditions that stay here. They believe in it, but they also believe in that model of keeping things where they started, and then helping the community and creating models that will last into the future beyond the people who started them. It's bigger than me for sure. So that's kind of what I believe in.
Thank you. So I'd like to switch gears just a bit here, and all of you know about the Tucson City of Gastronomy and what we're doing as an organization to promote our food system here and promote local businesses and bring economic development here that's going to improve food security for folks. But one of the things that Don and Todd can maybe talk about a little is that outside of Tucson and even outside of Arizona, there's become way more awareness about, what makes Tucson and Arizona so special. So I was wondering if you could both maybe give us some examples of just in your, how these folks that are, trying to scale their business or start a business, how really incorporating heritage foods and really what, sort of the, sort of the buzz about Tucson, how do you feel that has helped your business, and how can it help translate some of these folks' businesses.
Yep.
Todd, why
You
don't
want
you
to go? You want
start?
me to go?
Go for it. Go for it.
So,
I'll pause.
first of all, when we started this business, we were, what are we going to call ourselves, right? The tamale place, whatever. Tucson was, it was clear cut to us that we had to have Tucson in our name. We love, obviously, the city, and we knew that this was about, at some point, sharing Tucson with the rest of the country. We like to joke today, by the way, anybody who ever talks to anybody outside of Tucson, they love to spell it T-U-S-C-O-N or T-U-S-C-A-N. So we also say our mission is to teach the rest of the country how to spell Tucson. And we're not quite there yet, but we will get there. But for us, using Tucson was really more about, in the food industry, in the CPG industry, Boulder and Austin are seen as, if you have your food company's in Boulder, it must be good. Well, that's just whatever reason that is, I don't know. But we know that the reason it's important to us to be from Tucson and to promote Tucson and to talk about Tucson is because there is a food heritage here that a lot of people don't know about yet, but that are going to know about. And, we are connected to it. The rest of the country is not connected to it yet, as much as we want them to be. But that is a part of our mission, is to get the rest of the country understanding what, when people talk about a food desert, they typically talk about it in the sense that it's a food desert, that there's no food or no good food out there. I think we're a food desert in the best sense of the word, right? That we've got a lot to offer. And that's our mission when it comes to branding ourselves Tucson and keeping that out there in front of the front of the nation, the country.
That's great. So it's a positive spin on a food desert being something positive versus being something negative.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's great.
That's cool. No, I just say I agree with Todd. I think there's really this last decade has been very powerful for a spotlight to be shown on, our city. City of Gastronomy, UNESCO blessed us with that designation, thanks to the help of Jonathan, right, and his team, writing the grant for it. But it's been amazing. But I think, in terms of the grains, I'll speak for the grains, that Tucson is this region, Southern Arizona, is a premier grain growing region. And many people don't know that. It's amazing when you talk about it, because people think, why would you do that in the desert? Has it grown here? Well, this is going back to late 1690s, Father Kino with the white Sonoran wheat. This grain has been part of the desert, and it's a perfect cycle, planted in December and harvested in June before the monsoon. And we have a drying out of that grain, so we don't have the need for pesticides. And that's really around different parts of the country, you get that rust effect. Northwest, they're trying to lay pesticides as a way to suppress the weeds. So that's not part of it. And to dry the plant and to get it ready, because it cannot be wet, or unless, if it does, there's starch damage. But we have a natural effect. So when I speak to other people, not just from the US, but from, around, the grain growing regions like Middle East, they know about Tucson. The Italians, they've known about Tucson's because they're buying their durum flour, the durum wheat for pasta. And this has been going on. That's one of the things I talked about in the past with the farmers. Like, wouldn't you want to see that grain stay local? Wouldn't it be cool if it doesn't go to Italy and then comes back to us in the form of pasta? So I think more and more, thanks to, the community, the people, the businesses, we are starting to be recognized as premier gastronomy region in the world. And it's really been awesome to travel to these other countries, with UNESCO and the City of Gastronomy, because people are finding out, and that word has spread. There's a lot of other organizations, like La Delise Network is also a promoter, but I think we're just starting. I think, in no time, we're going to gain traction. But I think, people like right here, this man, like with the San Jacinto Farms, why don't people know? Why don't people know this is our tradition? And starting with the indigenous people, the native peoples, this should be the foundation. And I think it's important for us as a community to talk about it and promote it, because it really starts, like chefs will talk, where does the mise en place start? It starts in the kitchen, getting organized? No, it actually starts at the farm, starts with the people that are like saving the seeds and growing the food. That's where the mise en place starts. So I think that's kind of like my mission is to recognize where our food comes from, not from like the place where it's processed, and produced, but where it comes from in terms of the source, the material, the real food. Mhm. And I think this is where we're going as a city of gastronomy. We can talk about that, and that could be our language rather than the cool hip cities that have like trucking for so far away. We don't know where it came from, but we produce it, and who gets the recognition? The chef. To me, that's kind of a jip. It starts with inviting everyone inside that chain, that food chain or the grain chain in my case, to be recognized.
Great, thank you both. So I have one more question for Todd and Don, and then I'd like to open it up for those folks here and then on the live stream. And I'd kind of like you both to think about if you were sitting out in the audience today, a lot of people are here because they want to incorporate or they're considering incorporating heritage grains. And so there's that layer. And then, or excuse me, heritage ingredients and potentially grains. And then the second layer is really around innovation, because both of your companies have innovated, and that's like something that's really differentiated your companies in the marketplace. And then third, you both talked about your experience in starting up and bootstrapping. And it's challenging starting a business because there's so many different things that you have to manage. And I could tell you in my business, there's 3 people that work there: me, myself, and I. And so I'm sure. So the thing is that often, as so maybe you're lucky and you have 2 or 3 people, but the thing is like what advice, based on your experience, would you give folks on how to balance, balance the community and using and recognizing that having heritage ingredients helps not only your business, but our community. And then also that you want to be innovative and have differentiators, but at the same time, there's only so many dollars in the checking account. So yeah, I don't know. Can you maybe speak to that a bit?
Sure.
Go first.
Yeah. So, one thing that Gary said earlier is that we all have to keep in mind this is a business, right? You're still in business. And if there's less money at the end of the day than you started the day with, you're not in business anymore. And so if we really believe in the heritage ingredients, and if we really want to make this work, we first have to keep that in mind, that it is a business. I had Sherry and I had the fortunate experience of, we had planned on going into business. So we had money set aside. We structured it. So Sherry she stayed at Intuit for a few years. She had a good salary, so I didn't have to take money out of the business. But bootstrapping it's a challenge. It just is. And you have to be prepared to work hard. But it's also incredibly rewarding. And that's really what I like to talk about is, when I was in corporate America, I worked a 45 hour week, and I got home on Friday and I was exhausted. Now I work a 60 hour week, and I'm more energized every day. So the rewards are way different than taking home a paycheck. All that said, again, just keep in mind, it's still a business. When you're bootstrapping a business, it is about, sometimes you're the only one doing it, as Jay said, me, myself, and I, right? If somebody doesn't show up, you're back there washing dishes. I'm sure Janos has probably washed dishes quite a bit in his life. That's how you become successful and stay successful, is knowing that, whatever's got to be done, you do it. And then the other half of that is never sacrifice what your mission is, what your ideals are, right? We use only organic corn, and just recently we were faced with the potential not being able to get our organic corn. And we had 2 choices: stop producing, which meant no income, or use a non-organic corn, which had all kinds of different things. And while we did ask the question, the answer was always the same. It's like, we would stop producing, right? We would never use non-organic corn. We just won't do it. There's always that balance, and if you have that in mind, what your ideals are, what your financial structure is, you will always make, those things will guide you to make the right decisions to keep yourself profitable and keep yourself true. And that's what I like about truth telling, right?
Yeah, and I would say get involved. I mean, if you're a heritage food producer and you're not connected with City of Gastronomy and you don't know about UNESCO and you're not out making friends with people in the community that are doing it, then you're just missing out. So I think like the most important thing is to go out there and meet the people. Like these events are a great opportunity. And it's an easy way to connect on social media. You make friends with someone and they're, next thing you know, they're sharing your posts. They're like, rah, 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 check out this person. I went to their restaurant or cafe or whatever, and I got this. And it just doesn't take much to be part of that community. And so I say you really need to, like, if you want to be successful and you want your business to thrive, and you can do it in a short amount of time with social media. I did that, just with the Facebook, Instagram years ago. And now I look like put something on there and it blows up pretty fast, but it's like, great. So you have that, at your disposal. But this community, especially being a City of Gastronomy, there's so many opportunities to connect and so many events to go to. So it really takes those connections, and then through that, you'll gain a lot of support. And so that's really what I would say. Social media has been really big for me to get the word out. Also, what I did at the beginning is I would, because I'm that was my past as being an educator, I would have like some free seminars, like come check out my bread. I'll show you how I do it. So that was part of me as an educator, just being completely transparent. Like to me, people would say, if you teach them how to do it, then no one will buy your bread. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I've been trying to make this decent loaf for 30 years. If they can do it, good for them, And so people would come sort of thinking, I'm going to get this magic recipe. It's just a recipe, flour, water, salt, boom, magic, got it, Don's bread. But where they realize, like, that shit's hard. Like, I got a lot of practice. So they had to practice. But because of that, I became a mentor to them, and I always was available to them. But it created appreciation for what I do. And so I think that was really big for me, is like including people. So I was able to build a tribe, and if you have a tribe rather than clients, you're a lot stronger, because they're the ones talking about your business more than you are. So I think that's what it takes, is just building a tribe. And you can do that in many different ways, social media, or just getting out there, sourcing your ingredients from that farmer, and then you're promoting that farmer. Check this out. This is who, these are the grains I'm using. These are the mesquite flour I'm using. Look at this person too. Because like I said, really bringing a light on the source is, I think for me, like becoming the most important thing of what I do and how I market my position in the community. And I also can't do it without the community itself. They're part of the circular economy model. Without the customers, I just have a surplus of bread. So I need everybody.
Yeah, and I really love what you're saying, because one of my biggest lessons a long time ago was ask for help. And I think that's really key, right? Is that ask for help, right? You're only going to be better when you ask for help.
Yeah, and just be real too, like being transparent. Like I think if you have that authenticity, people see that. If you're kind of faking it, it's really going against the grain. I want to say against the grain. No red jokes. But if you're kind of going against like who you really are, that becomes difficult.
Yeah,
you're kind of high in a way, right? But if you're truly authentic, that shines bright, and people are like, "Wow, Todd is just super passionate about the tamales." Don is so passionate about the breads, or Adam with the chocolate. Derrick with the ranching and the sourcing of his ingredients local. I mean, it's really, that is probably the most important thing and most powerful thing for me anyway, is just being real.
That's wonderful wisdom. Thank you both. So how much time do we have left for questions? Is somebody,
Did I talk too much?
Jonathan? Do we have any questions from the audience for these two gentlemen? Yes. Here you go.
Hi, my question is going to be for Don, but also, Don, I want to tell you, thank you so much for what you share with us. I know there's a couple of us here today because you promoted this event.
Yeah.
But when I see you somewhere in Asia teaching people how to bake bread, I feel very proud of Tucson. So you do that for all of us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
So I do have a question. I recently ate at Barrio Charo, and I know as an entrepreneur myself that I like to make my own decisions. And I'm very curious about that, you cooperating with another business, and would you do that again? And what's, how did that come about?
Oh, good question. Yeah, and that's really, to me, sort of where I'm at. And I think getting to the pinnacle of my career is the collaborations, because I really believed in that. And like I said, people asking for help and you supporting them, like, this is what I've done. And it's gotten to me to be some like really far out opportunities. And so the collaboration with Barrio Charo in the Flores family, we have been knowing each other for about 10 years. And they just first wanted bread at the restaurants. And I was in the garage. I said, no, I can't do it. Carlota would call me about once a month. Mijo, you need any food? She'd always cook me food and bring it. Sweetest. So we started they asked me at a good time I could do it. The restaurant opened January 12th during COVID. And it was just a great partnership because of course, the tortas, but I had a small company that was doing it before, Barrio Sandwiches, but it was just a really good fit. And I've loved to do this with brewers too, making beers, working with other bakers, but now restaurateurs. And you'll see more of this from me, is a way to offer more to the community outside of my scope of business. So we can enjoy more together, and feel the same way, me coming into their lives and having this partnership. We're able to share our expertise and it's working well. And so this is something I want to do more and more of in the future, is have these collaborations, and a place to go. For me, it's a lot of fun. I now can say I have a restaurant and it's pretty cool. I can go get some, can always eat. But it's been pretty fun in that way. And so I've worked with Todd a little bit with the flour for his tortillas now, and other people that are using Barrio Grains flour. So this is my entry into the market, working with not only retail side, but other commercial side of selling my flour products to producers and then giving them support and feedback and channels for distribution. And so you'll see more of that with Barrio Grains, people using any flour products for their goods. This is what I want to supply, but then we have some branding together on that. And then when people see two really positive, labels on there, it's like win-win. We want to do it together, and people know that the integrity is there, that it's Arizona. And that's what I say is for the starting entrepreneurs, like, latch on to those people. Seriously, they don't mind. Like, promote where you're getting your ingredients from and promote that you're part of this city of gastronomy. Hopefully you fill out that artisan and awards where you can certify your businesses, your food production businesses for city of gastronomy sanction, and that really helps. So do all those things and just connect with people, and then start sharing social media and get people to like your stuff by going out liking their stuff a lot first. Yeah, it's just pretty much organically. Right now, I think I have like 40,000, 35, 37, 30,000 on my Instagram, but people ask me, oh, how you can buy followers? They're like, you bought the followers, right? I'm like, no, I didn't. But it was just about being real, like sharing little parts of like who I was as a person outside of the baking. I felt like was real. And people were like, this guy just doesn't make the bread. He's got this life too. So I'm like sharing different things to make it authentic and real. But I just started doing that, on a daily, just tracking a little bit of my life and showing it, in the appropriate parts, because I'm a little crazy, but hey, just showing that and being real, and then also supporting other people. And then I noticed a lot of bakers would say, wow, how did you make that? So cool. And if I had time, for sure, did that for them, get back to them, because that's part of my education background, just being patient with those people and then offering them something. But in turn, what I got is like an avalanche of support back. So like being open to that, not being closed off, and sharing my expertise, because it started just flow back. And the next thing I know, I was just getting into the thousands, because people are like really like the top tier bakers in America were like wow, Don, this and that. And then I started getting invited to expos where I was hanging out with these people I looked at were like upper echelon of baking. And then I always thought I would go to those events and I would say, wow, how cool would it be if I was that chef and being up there? And next thing I know, I'm like, I'm that guy. I was like, wow, just because we're all people, it's like not they're these people and you're those people, you're all people. And then I realized that. So that's why I was just being true to myself, authentic. And you can meet some of the most like people that you just go gaga over, but what you realize, like, they're normal too. They're just people. They just happen to be super excited about what they do. But tapping into that and sharing your enthusiasm, next thing you know, you have their support and endorsement. So I got far doing that. And just, I'd say just being real and yeah, supporting others.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. So I wanted to see if we could all give Todd and Don a big hand for taking the time to talk to us today. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And we're gonna break for lunch and we have many, many different treats. And I'm gonna give you a selfish little plug about my company. So my company is called Mora Condiments and we're in the product development stage. You can see we've now have our packaging done, but we have two of our pretty far along products today, our Chipotle paste and our Jamaican jerk chutney. So our products are big flavor condiments, utilizing heritage ingredients and inspired by global cuisine. So one of the things that I'm looking for is that if you could take, this is a QR code that goes to a Google survey and it will I have 5 quick questions just to get your feedback in terms of these two products. And the QR code is also at the desk. So everybody, thank you so much and enjoy your lunch. Buen provecho.
Welcome back from lunch, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. Looks like we got everybody. We're going to start our next panel. And I'm really pleased to introduce Gay Chanler. We have not known each other long, but I've really enjoyed our conversations and our Zoom meetings. And it was great to meet her in person today. And Gay is a former professional chef based in the Flagstaff area. And was also a member of, I forget the exact name, you can correct me, the Western section of Slow Food USA and the Slow Food Arc of Taste Committee. So really pleased to have her here today as a moderator, and I'm gonna let her tell you more about herself and introduce the panelists. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for that delicious lunch, all of you producers who provided us with that lovely food. It's nice to be here today with food enthusiasts. And yes, I was a co-leader of the Flagstaff chapter of Slow Food for a number of years and served on the Arc of Taste Committee, which is the slow food effort on biodiversity to protect, to discover, protect, and promote heritage foods. So that's kind of how I fit in here. And today we're very pleased to have Chef Ryan Clark at the end. Chef Ryan has been cooking since he was 16 and he's had a lot of accolades, first at the Culinary Institute of America, where he graduated with top honors. And then he has had a kind of a sparkling career in various restaurants in Arizona, and is known probably best for his startup Augustin restaurant in the Old Mission District, and now is cooking at the Casino del Sol PY Steakhouse, and has always been an advocate of farm to table. He's been the Iron Chef for 3 consecutive years, the Slow Food Tucson leader, and winner of the World Margarita Challenge. So welcome, Ryan.
Thank you.
And
Thank
in
you.
the center, we have the grandfather of the farm to table. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. The founder of Farm to Table Foods in the Tucson area, really. Janos Wilder started in many years ago with his restaurant incorporating heritage and local foods. And he is actually a James Beard Award winner. So we're very pleased to have him. He's a star in our constellation of food people here. Janos was famous for Downtown Kitchen, for his restaurant at La Paloma. And did you start Kai?
Yeah, I did, as a matter of fact. I was the consulting chef at Kai up at Wild Horse Pass, yeah.
Wild Horse Pass. So he's very well known and much honored culinary star here. And last but not least, we have Derrick Winmark, from formerly from Flagstaff, now residing in Tucson. And Derrick is the founder behind the Diablo Burger, and which is one of Flagstaff's best eateries. And he also expanded to Tucson. He had this idea when he worked for the Diablo Trust, which was a ranch consortium up in Flagstaff area, where all this wonderful beef was being exported out of state. So Derrick said, we ought to have some local beef here. And he started the Diablo Burger. And, you know, he combined the heritage food concept, the local sustainable food concept, the community food concept with the basic burger. So it has appeal for everybody. So we have these three wonderful chefs who focus on, you know, local, sustainable, organic, and heritage. And not necessarily in that importance of order, but let's start with you, Janos. Tell us how you got involved and what your passion is for these elements.
Well, I came to it kind of in a direct and sort of somewhat direct and indirect route. My first love of cooking was French food, so that doesn't really seem to fit here, does it? But it kind of does. So having, as a youngster, I started cooking. I was just a kid and grew up in cooking in restaurants, and was kind of ready to start my own, but wasn't really, and felt that I needed, particularly if I wanted to cook French food, if I wanted to start my own restaurant, I had to go to France. I had to really learn how to cook, and I had the opportunity to do that. And of all the things that I learned in France, the most important thing was the relationship between the chef and the gardener, and the chef and the fisherman, and the chef and the bread baker, and people who would make your cheese. And we'd go to the market every single day. And on the way, I worked in two great restaurants, a Michelin 2-star and Michelin 1-star restaurant in Bordeaux. We would go to the market every single day. On the way back from the market, we would write that day's menus. And so when I came back to the US, and my wife's from Nogales, that's how we settled in Tucson, I realized that the most significant thing that I learned there was to use what was local. And as a newcomer to Tucson myself, I didn't actually think anything grew here. Looked out in the desert and said, well, that's not going to be too easy. And so I started, but I still was determined to make it happen. And so I started advertising for gardeners back there before we advertised for staff, and really built the restaurant from the ground up in that way. But at that point, you know, this was 1983, and I was interested in little baby squash with their blossoms still attached, and little turnips and all these little baby vegetables that were in vogue at that time. And so we sort of practiced vegetable infanticide and picked things really young back then. And But slowly, as I, for the first several years, I never left my kitchen. I still didn't think anything could actually really grow here other than people's backyards. And slowly, with the dawning of recognition, I learned about native seed search. And a friend of mine, Doug Biggers, who was at that time ran the Tucson Weekly and later Edible Baja, was on the board of the native seed search. He asked me if I would cater a dinner for them. I said, well, I better find out what the hell these guys are about. And I said, okay, I'll do that, but I'm going to do with all of your foods. And from that moment on, that was probably 5 or 6 or 7 years into my career at our first restaurant. I really began to really explore those things. I was always interested in what you could grow here, but I became interested in what had always grown here. And through that, really started taking a deep dive into the foods of the region, the ingredients of the region, the ancient ingredients of the region, and started exploring what I began to know as the cultural culinary icons of the regions. What were those dishes in Tucson that in themselves defined the authenticity of the food place?
Well, thank you for that. That's great. I want to go to you, Ryan, and take a leap from that to how do you incorporate the local foods? You have maybe a different clientele because you have visitors coming from all over the world to your restaurant. So how do you open the door for them to experience the terroir and the taste, the heritage of this area?
Yeah, we certainly do. Like you said, I graduated from the Culinary Institute of America, and that was in New York. And going to school out there was just complete kind of culture shock for me, a Tucson native, seeing seasons for the first time, right? And things changing. But what was really cool about there is they really taught us to respect the ingredients. We visited a lot of the farms while we were there and really seeing the different ingredients throughout the seasons. And I really wanted to come back to Tucson and try and feature that in some of the restaurants I've worked at. I worked at Lodge on the Desert. You mentioned the downtown restaurant, and now at the casino. And the casino has really given me the opportunity to use a lot of different local foods. We have 16 restaurants and bars on property. So we try to feature stuff throughout the entire property during the seasons that it's appropriate. One of the things that we do really well is we partnered up with Pivot Produce. Eric does an amazing job of helping us get some of the best products available for that season. And we change the menus monthly at every single one of our outlets and feature one ingredient that grows really well in Southern Arizona during that time. So that's a way for everybody to experience local foods at each individual restaurant. Of course, at PY Steakhouse, we try to feature local foods throughout the entire menu. It's a new American style steakhouse. So all of our beef comes from Arizona, fed and processed here in Arizona. And then we also feature grass-fed beef from Arizona and then work with local purveyors like Ben Forbes to source unique cuts that are seasonal on our menus.
Seasonality can be an issue sometimes, right? In a restaurant. I mean, Derrick, in the meat business in Northern Arizona, all those, it's mostly cow-calf operations, right? They're not being fattened in corn lots. And how did you work that out with the supply? Because beef can be seasonal.
Yeah. Well, I want to start by saying that Diablo Burger was conceived very much in a seminar like this, workshop like this, back in Flagstaff in 2007. As you mentioned, I was working for the Diablo Trust. I was the communications coordinator for a ranching-based nonprofit. And Gary, who at the time was slumming at NAU, organized an event like this. And he brought in these guys from Idaho, and they had a nonprofit like ours. And like us, they had trouble raising money for their monitoring projects, and they had trouble telling their story to the community. And then they found, almost by accident, that as they started selling their lamb in the local farmers market in Idaho, that as the sale of the lamb went up, the appreciation for the conservation went up. And that was really my aha moment of like, I got to figure out how to sell this beef in this town. because when I moved to Flagstaff to run Diablo Trust, people would say to me, if I'd met people in town, dinner or whatever, they'd say, "What do you do in town?" I say, "I work for Diablo Trust." And they say, "What's that?" And I just thought that was weird. This was a nationally renowned conservation group, had just won a Forest Service National Award for the Conservation Nonprofit of the Year. Nobody in town knew what we did. And so I had the idea for Diablo Burger even before I had tasted the meat, because you couldn't taste the meat because, as Gay said, all of the beef from Coconino County went into the national market, and then we bought beef back from the national market, and that didn't make any sense to me. Beef is the largest cash crop in Coconino County. At least it was. I assume it still is. And until my business came along, all of it would go into the national market, and then we would buy beef, whether it was in the local stores, in the local restaurants, often at a higher price and at lower quality than what was being grown in our backyard. And then I think I can't overstate the role of luck for me. I feel like I got really lucky. We got really lucky because the meeting place for my small burger joint and the ranches who supplied our beef worked really well for both parties. And then the seasonality thing that you talk about is we had to figure out how to store a year's worth of beef without having to pay for a year's worth of beef, because we were bootstrapping it like everyone else. We couldn't afford to write a check for a year's supply of beef. But because I had worked for the ranches, because they trusted me, because they wanted Diablo Burger to succeed, to help tell the story that they were trying to tell, they invested in, they set aside a year's worth of beef for us. We figured out how to store it. We would pull it. And then at the end of every month, we would generate a report to the ranches saying, this month we used 10, 11, 12, 13,000 pounds of beef. They would bill us for that and we would pay for it. So I think it's really important. One of the things that I talk a lot about in my business to people who want to do the kind of things that I'm doing is you have to come up with mutually beneficial relationships between yourself and the supplier. And that takes time, and it doesn't always work.
Yeah, we've heard that before here, a success story. So that's good to know. I mean, it's something you really have to work at.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, is introducing heritage foods to your dining public, is it more than putting a new twist on old favorites? Is it creating, a new dish? How are you using the products in your creative endeavors? Janos, go ahead.
So it's not necessarily putting a new twist on old products, but it certainly can be. When we started working with these ancient products, I wasn't really necessarily interested in recreating the ways they had been used. I wanted to for myself, I wanted to cook really modern food at a very high end using local ingredients that were unique, had unique flavor profiles, had a really unique and compelling story that went with them, and to create fine food at a fine dining level that spoke of being in Tucson. And so having those local products, the local heritage foods did that. As I looked around the world at fine dining restaurants at that time, and boy, they're the greatest restaurants in the world, but I realized that if you closed your eyes and you ate in these restaurants and you didn't know, you could really be anywhere. They didn't have a sense of place. And I wanted somebody who ate in my restaurant, if they closed their eyes, they knew they were in Tucson, and do that on the highest level. And so that was sort of the way that I was looking at it. You don't have to do it at the highest level. That was the aspiration that I had for my restaurant. And so to take authentic foods and use them in a different way than they might have been used before. We do them in all sorts of different ways, but that was what I was looking at.
What's an example of, let's say, some of your most successful dishes that accomplished?
Well, so I talked earlier about what I began to see as the cultural culinary icons. What were the dishes that in themselves began to define the foods of the region? And so my background is in political science. That's what I studied in school. And we had a concept called an ideal type. What was a political unit in its purest form? So what was the ideal type of a dish? So the first one I sort of explored were chili rellenos. So I just stripped the chili relleno down to what its basics were, not what the flavor profiles were, not all the components. Really, first of all, what was the chili? How did you treat the chili to make it the absolute best chili for stuffing that you could have? How could you keep the color to it? How did you get the skin off it? All of those sorts of things. So I sort of, reverse engineered the chili relleno. And then, well, I can put anything I want in this. So I stuffed it with lobster. And coming from having been recently in France, I was so proud to be able to make a really great Mantua sauce. And, just sweat over, straining all the flavors and twisting through cheesecloth to get all the last drippings of the flavor out of the lobster for my sauce. So that was the first thing, was a chili relleno with Mantua sauce. And I made because it worked, a little salad with jicama on the side that created a little bit of crunch, and the flavor profiles worked great. And it was really taking something and really elevating it in a different way. But still, where that chili itself, you could get no better.
Sounds delicious. So Ryan, how about you? Tell me about your experiments and what's been.
I'm hungry now.
Yeah, I know.
That sounded good. I think I've had that before.
I haven't had one in a long time.
I think it's so important for us as chefs to really celebrate the food, but celebrate the producers, right? So I think what we try to do at the casino is it might not be the fanciest food or the simplest food, but we have a little bit of everything. So at our Italian restaurant, for example, we make pasta from scratch. We use 100% Arizona wheat. So we use a blend of Sonora wheat and Durham, blue Durham. And then we use pork sausages that are made locally by a E&R ranch. So they put them together for us. And that's a simple dish, but it's really about the service. You have to have the service to celebrate the producers, right? So we can put it on the menu and that's cool. But a lot of people, they read menus and they're like, what's all this information? Sometimes it might come off a little weird, but really good servers that can sell the story is really what makes a restaurant amazing. So we try really hard to give the most education that we possibly can to all of our staff, whether it's daily lineups or a menu change where we're tasting food and we're talking about it, and just constantly educating the staff so that they can take that story and then tell it to our guests. And I think that's what really continues to push forward the movement. We have such amazing chefs like Janos and Derrick, and I see a few up in the audience here today, and it's just like, we continue to push it forward, but the education that we give our staff, that's what's really gonna make the food what it is.
Ryan, I agree with you completely, because people are going to, when people leave, they might remember the flavor, but they're going to remember the entire experience. And they're going to remember that relationship with the server who told them the story. And that's what puts it in its place more than anything else. So that training, and often overlooked, and so important.
And someone told me this years ago, I don't remember who it was, but they were very smart. They said, people go to a restaurant for the food, but they come back for the hospitality. And that's what it's all about, that great service and hospitality that brings people back because they have that story that connects them.
Derrick, chime in on that, because you had a big story to tell to the Flagstaff community. And I think you did well with that.
Well, thanks. I think these guys have touched on the secret sauce that makes these businesses work. And I think this notion of taste of place is is really essential. Like Diablo Burger does one offsite event every year at a vineyard in Page Springs. And people come from all over the world there to do this sort of burgers and barrels experience. And when I'm there to talk about Diablo, I start by playing a game with them, because these are people who've traveled all over the world. And I say, well, when you go to Maine, what are you going to eat? When you go to the Pacific Northwest, what are you gonna have? And everyone associates taste with place. And I think that in this world that is increasingly homogenized on the one hand, where, like you said, you can close your eyes and actually have no idea where you are, people want that experience of taste of place. I know I do when I travel. So one of the things that was really interesting for me about my business when we started was grass-fed beef that we serve is super, super lean, 97, 98% lean. And the ranchers for whom I get my beef said, Derrick, people are not going to want to eat this burger. You're going to have to put fat into it. And so before we opened the business, and I was skeptical, but they're ranchers, they know beef. I thought, okay, we'll try this. So before we opened Diablo Burger, we did a taste test. We had 100% product, 100% grass-fed, and then we had like a 90% and then 80%, and we mixed the fat in. And we did this taste test of this product, and I didn't even let anybody else weigh in. I was like, I'm serving 100% grass-fed beef. I'm serving 100% taste of place. I'm not going to adulterate it with something that makes it taste more like a mainstream burger, because I really want people to taste. People say you can bite into this burger, you can taste the grass of the high desert of the high, the Coconino Plateau. And I'm a stubborn person, and I think if someone had told me at the beginning, your restaurant will only succeed if you compromise on the integrity of this beef, I would have refused to do it. And I think the ranchers were worried, but I just said, we're going to sink or swim on the integrity of this product. And I think 13 years later, it's the integrity of that product that has made the difference.
Well, how did you adapt that? I mean, did you have to cook it differently, or was the beef aged longer, or?
Yeah, no, it's not aged. We cook it over a char broiler. It's you see these national chain burger places that say this beef has never been frozen, and I go, really? How does that work? So we just figured out a way to make it work. But to this day, 13 years later, the single biggest Achilles heel of my business is that we recommend that the burger be cooked medium rare because it's so lean. And a lot of people have never had a medium rare burger in their life. And the reasons for that are really simple. If you eat a burger at Diablo Burger, you're eating beef that comes from one cow. If you eat a burger at a place that doesn't care where it sources its beef from, that beef is coming from hundreds of cows, and they've been mixed in a processing facility. And in order for that to be safe, because if one of those cows is sick, then all of the beef is tainted. For that to be safe, they have to overcook the beef. So to this day, we'll cook it however people want it, but that's still a sort of an education story that we have to tell every day, which is, if you really want to taste this product, you need to order it medium rare.
No, it's important. But it is a big difference, I think. People need to understand that. So your roles as chefs, you're the hospitality people. You welcome people into your establishment from near and from afar, and you present them with delicious, carefully prepared food that has integrity, that has flavor, that has a connection to the place. And I firmly believe that your message is probably broadcast because you're successful. And is this a model that you can share that you think can work for other restaurateurs and chefs, even in maybe, let's say, institutional settings, not necessarily commercial?
I think, so, Don Huerta talked a lot about that. And he uses a social media model to incredible effect and impact. But the bottom line for Don is not his social media, it's how goddamn good his bread is. And that's the bottom line for all of us. It's the quality of of the product. It's not, you can't beat them over the head about what it's about. They have to taste what it's about. And then you'll make believers out of them. And we're opinion leaders in ways because we're willing to try stuff and put it on the menu because we believe in it. And not just for the sake of, I want to try something different, but because it tastes great. And that's the key to your burger. It tastes great. If you said, I'm only going to do 100% beef and no fat in it, and it sucked, you wouldn't be open today, right? So, but you knew it and you believed in it. And if you're right, then they're going to follow.
Right, and as I think Don or one of the other panelists said, it really starts, with the soil and the garden. It's not just like what you pull off the shelf that makes your meal, important and distinctive. But I don't know how much time we have, but I wanted to go into the beverage department because, Ryan, that seems like something you have some experience and talent for.
I just love margaritas.
Okay. Well, have you branched out and done things with prickly pear and tamarind or?
Yeah, we use a lot of different local ingredients to make syrups with pecans and pistachios. A lot of different agave cocktails. One of my favorite drinks that we do, I like to kind of pair certain local ingredients together and kind of make another layer to it. So we have a export ribeye, the big bone-in ribeye that we dry age, and we dry age in-house. Our dry ager, if you open it up, you can just smell the amazing dry aged beef and the whiskey because we use Del Bach whiskey, a local whiskey from here in Tucson, and we lightly rub the outside. When we cook that, we get that nice smoky flavor. So we have a drink on the menu that's made with the dry aged beef fat, washed through the whiskey, and then finished with a little bit of smoke. So kind of playing off of that, the food items and the beverage components and kind of bringing the two together, I think it's kind of whimsical and just fun and a great way to celebrate some amazing products from the area.
Is that popular?
Very popular, yeah.
All right, here's a question. Who are some of the women involved in heritage food growing, preparing, and selling? We've appreciated the moderating from Melissa Billfield and Gay Chanler and the critical role of Sherry Martin in Tucson Tamales. Which other women are the spokespeople and promoters of heritage foods? Well, I think we've had Sherry Romanoff, is that her name? Romanovsky is very important in that field. We have Ramona and Velvet Button from Ramona Farms, who grow a lot of the Tona Autumn traditional crops, and they provide recipes and so on. Locally, do we have some?
I would talk about Charlene Badman at F&B in Scottsdale.
Scottsdale, yes. And
she's a powerhouse. She's
Charlene Badman, yes.
Forever Young Farms, Young Robert at Forever Young Farms. I think that, but I would say that the food service business, our industry, is still underrepresented by women, I would say. I mean, it's a really good question to ask because it brings something to light. So we have certainly more women working in the back of the house, where when I started, there were very few women in the kitchen, and by the end, till recently, yeah, there are a lot more women in the kitchen. But boy, that's hard place to work and raise a family too.
It's true. That's a good point, right?
We should definitely add Chef Maria from Boca, who's put
absolutely.
Tucson on the map, really supporting local ingredients, and James Beard nominated just on Top Chef this last season. So it's been fun to watch her and what she does for Tucson and supporting us.
On my list. is.
And then someone else I would talk about who's from Arizona, Blake Spalding, who was in Flagstaff, and then she and her partner started Hell's Backbone Grill in Boulder, Utah. The Blake Burger on the Diablo Burger menu is named after her because I met her when I was wanting to start my business, and she said, "Derrick, you can't have a burger joint in the Southwest and not have a green chili burger." But that's an incredible restaurant that has taken their commitment to sourcing locally really to the absolutely highest level. So I would definitely recommend checking out Hell's Backbone if you're ever in that neck of the woods.
And I have another recommendation in Phoenix, Rancho Pino. The woman chef there, and I can't remember her name, but she started Slow Food Phoenix. And she was kind of the forerunner of farm to table restaurant dining in Phoenix area. Krista Kaufman, thank you. So there are some women leaders in this field, but they're maybe outnumbered. We didn't have one today.
So for those of us who are chefs and work with the sort of the intermediary to end product of the Southern Arizona Food Shed, one of the problems that, of course, we run into is sourcing and availability of ingredients. I'm just wondering if there's any impetus or movement in trying to form partnerships for scaling, for bringing in, for all the little farmers like for Forever Young, for example, and Rattlebox and any number of these others to bring in partners, just to throw out a name, somebody like a Marcon Produce to help with scaling and logistics, to be able to then perhaps have COG certified product line of produce and raw ingredients and help with distribution to the Tucson market and perhaps beyond, so that it carries the imprimatur of Tucson and of the COG and growing practices and the terroir of Tucson is in the food, and it's certified and available to us, rather than just having to drive out to the farms or rely on the limited operational capacity of those distributing in Tucson.
So I wish Gary Chavez was still here, because I think he might be able to help answer that, because Gary, I think you're part of this. You're a big part of the answer to that question. And as you were talking earlier, I was thinking, boy, you've got all that land out there. We need to. And I actually texted Jonathan during your talk and said, how do we support this guy? He needs to be able to use all that land to be more of that land to be growing local products and heritage products, because there's a huge market for that. I don't have the answer to your question, Devin, but it's a really good one. We've made a lot of progress over the years. When I first started, and we had to buy everything that our gardeners grew because nobody else would buy it. So I had all the stuff in the walk-in that I bought in excess of because there wasn't the market. Now there's the market, and we're not necessarily meeting demand. Gary, we want you.
Yes, definitely. And that's it's very exciting. And thank you for all having me and the co-op here. But yes, that's definitely a conversation that we need to have. And, I've heard it again and again today, is that, the demand, the need, and of course, the product. Definitely be able to plan. And that's something that we're currently doing. As I mentioned, we have 900 acres, 800 of those are currently farmable, but we are focused on alfalfa. But because of the importance of the foods, we definitely are planning at this point. We just planted for our winter crop, and definitely going to start planning for our summer crop. So definitely have the conversations with you all. That's why I decided to stick around, because it's such great conversation. I do have cards with me, so we'll definitely plan for the future for all your businesses.
Are there any more questions? Well, thank you, Gay, and thank you, chefs. That was a great session.
Thank you.
So now we're going to transition to the last session. And I'm going to ask Mark Peterson from the University of Arizona McGuire Center for Entrepreneurship to come up here and moderate this session. And Mark, I understand that you are also a food entrepreneur in your career. And could you tell us a little bit about that? And then please talk to your discussants and get some good conversation going.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a senior lecturer, a faculty member at the McGuire Center for Entrepreneurship, and pre-academia I was in in the food business, actually in the bakery area for about 16 years in total. First in London in the UK, and then in Tokyo in Japan. I don't know, I survived somehow. What I would say is being a faculty member is a heck of a lot easier than running a food business. But it's, you know, it was my passion. It was something I wanted to do. I was pretty successful in it. And it's given me, you know, at least some amount of credibility in talking to my students about entrepreneurship. So it's not just coming from theories and so on. There actually are some good stories and some horror stories to tell, which make maybe the class more interesting at times. So thanks for inviting me along today to be a part of this. This is our last session, and I haven't met the two of you before, but welcome. So I guess because it is the last session, it would be great to maybe learn or to think about what would be the key learnings from today, or what are the key takeaways that we should take with us. Okay, do you want to start?
Well, it seems that it's pretty clear that there's a lot of dedication among the growers, among the chefs, among the entrepreneurs here for this mission about local foods, heritage foods in particular, which really is important for the whole biodiversity in the food shed, which is very important in terms of, I hate to say the word food security, but we need to talk about that these days in these times of drought. And I think a number of things came up, integrity, transparency, you know, the passion for purity and authenticity came through again and again. And these qualities come from inside, come from the individual. So we have a bunch of leaders here who are all dedicated to this. And I think, you know, maybe a small seed, but, you know, many things come from one seed. And I think that's really important for the future of our food here in Arizona, and particularly maybe in the Tucson Basin.
Gary? Okay.
Maybe turning it on would help. Yeah. I think I was struck by how many people mentioned that they had a vision, and whether it was obvious that it was marketable at that moment in time, they stuck with their vision. And that meant that they had to go through a number of changes in shaping that vision to make it economically viable, and also so that they wouldn't burn themselves out, which is another big issue both with chefs and farmers. And I think one thing I heard that I'd never listened to panels like this and got as a core message is how many shifts once you have that vision, you have to go through to get it at the right scale. And that things like the 2008 recession and COVID have thrown all kinds of monkey wrenches in that. So you're not just gearing up, but you're also gearing down now and then, or you're doing what you can, like Tucson Tamale with one commissary kitchen to scale up to a certain size, but then you're looking for another one so that you'll have two areas where you can diversify your products and try out new things. And so I think that the flexibility and adaptability combines with that vision. I think Janos, someone said I was real bullheaded about this. And I know Derrick well enough that, you know, he really stuck to his guns on things too, about the integrity, like you're saying, Gay. But there's also a lot of adaptability. Janos's trajectory included 5 different strategies for getting across his expression of what the food of this place is about. Most recently, the Carriage House. So I think that combination of having deep conviction in your vision, but knowing that you're not going to get there all at once, and at times you have to downscale. My own son-in-law is a native Hawaiian chef who loves Mexican food. They opened the first mezcal bar in Honolulu and this big restaurant 2 months before the COVID pandemic, and then had to fire 30 of their staff almost immediately because people weren't going out to restaurants. What they did was brilliant. They ended up using that as a commissary for local pickups of the same products, but Honolulu, like Seattle or many other towns in the West, is really different, almost self-contained buying hubs. And so they just did hole in the wall corner outlets for the food that they did in the commissary until they can reopen. So using your vision and sticking to it doesn't mean that it's rigid. It means that you probably need a whole lot of flexibility and someone talking you out of going with your ego to adapt your vision along the way. And I think that's really, really important, shifting directions. And, you know, I think one of the painful things in the last 10 years with the buzz about food in Tucson and the edible Baja magazine and all the stuff it generated was that there was no farms to support all the demand for local foods among restaurants and the school district and everything. There was competition because over 60 years we'd let our farming atrophy and all our ranches go into the national market. I hear some really optimistic things. One development in Santa Cruz County is going to be an agri-hood of about 200 acres of small farms. Another place in Santa Cruz County is going to rent small parcels, but also repurpose a farm as a training center for young farmers. So I think we're going to get through that bottleneck, but it's taken 15 years of talking about it to get there.
Thank you. And I as well, also from the previous panel, I think we were hearing that there are more steps involved, that it's harder to follow this heritage food route, but the payoff definitely seems to be there. And I wonder what your thoughts are for the future of heritage foods in Arizona.
Well, I think there is movement. I mean, both Ramona Farms, she's expanded, you know, her production and her marketing, and he's going to do the same thing. And so that's the heritage food part. In where I live, people are planting orchards and in Oak Creek Canyon and growing heritage apples. It's not a big market, but it does expand the biodiversity of the fruit in that area, and it introduces it to people. I noticed in not so much in Sedona, but Flagstaff, Phoenix, there is movement towards introducing heritage foods, you know, to kids through gardening and gardening projects, the Blue Watermelon Project that's part of the slow food thing. And I think there's hope, but I'm not directly involved myself to be able to measure that. I think it's coming through the efforts of, people like Don, who's trying to teach people. I think education is the big thing. School gardens, I think are going very well in Prescott. So that's one area where I see that happening. Gary, you probably have more contact with people working on this.
I mean, the interest that chefs here like Jano showed in the heritage vegetables and grains, not just Native American heirlooms, but things that have been with the Mexican population here forever, and even things from other immigrant groups that came to the Southwest, really boomed. But again, we had a limit on the supply because of the low number of farmers we have here. And the heritage grains and Don has really helped move along with Hayden Flour Mills and other people. But again, it's still about under 250 acres of heritage grains in the state. That's nothing compared to most states. I think we have to more broadly define heritage foods. And let me just give you some examples. Dennis Maroney is close to starting a new foundation to work with heritage breeds of livestock in this region. Some of you know the great work he's done with Navajo Churro sheep, but more specifically with Criollo, the earliest introduced Spanish cattle to the New World. And I think we're going to see some great things come out of that. But I'm also thinking we've undervalued spices other than maybe chiltepine. We have the most aromatic herbaceous plants in the world here, from desert lavender and a half dozen oreganos to many other things with aromatic oils in them that are just part of the desert landscape here that are undervalued. The same thing with ingredients for gins and stuff. I think we're going to see a continued renaissance of locally produced beverages. Steve Paul started it with the mesquite smoked whiskey, and Brian Eikenkorn with bringing back tepache and tezuino. We've just done a paper that came out last week on the traditional fermented beverages of the Southwest and Mexico. And it's over 160 different species of plants and 16 broad groupings of fermented probiotic beverages, some of them distilled, some not. I think that's going to explode like fermented foods has. And then the other thing is that if you go to Europe and you talk about heritage foods, it's securing and the processing, not just the genetics. And I think we're way behind on thinking about that. Most of the Southwest cultures use culinary ash. We wouldn't have Peaky bread and all the great blue corn products of the Hopi and Navajo without their detailed knowledge of what ash matches with what corn or other grain. Using cured juniper berries and other things as spices and flavorants. We're way behind the rest of the country on that. Doing waters like rose water and orange blossom water like the Middle East and North Africa do. We have dozens of things that we can do here. And some of those are traditional to this region. So I think we've had too narrow of a view of what heritage foods are. There's going to be a lot more things saying, well, why did they process that thing like sun-dried squash? Who ever heard of sun-dried squash? We know sun-dried tomatoes, but there's this thing all over Sonora in the Southwest called bichicores, where you sort of unravel the whole squash in little curly cubes and dry it on your clothesline. And it's intensely flavorful when you rehydrate it. So we have thought about the genetics and who the farmer is and telling those stories, but not much about ramping up and riffing off the traditional processing. Just like Jano said, I didn't try to cook like a Tohono O'odham or a Hopi. I used it like a jazz musician would use a traditional tune. I took it new places from that anchored foundation in history. And I think we're going to see that with curing meats, curing vegetables, and all of that.
One other thing, also, I mean, in the seed banks in my community, you know, people are experimenting with heritage squashes and they can trade those seeds locally. And I think that's a good way for people to grow them in their own gardens, you know, and then when they enjoy that product, they will come up with, you know, ways to use it or preserve it, as Gary's saying, you know, with pickles and chutneys. That chutney at lunch today was delicious. I mean, there's ways of spreading the good news about these
That's
foods, even just from the home garden. So I'm hopeful about that when I see from the seed banks.
Thank you. And something I guess we've all lived in Arizona through the pandemic and seen the support for local restaurants, and that have even put out signs saying, you know, go local, support local, eat local. And I think, you know, many of us recognize that these local establishments need our support far more than a national chain. And do you think this post-pandemic that this support for local is this here to stay? Is this a lasting trend?
Well, I know that a lot of people were going to the farmer's market as opposed to the grocery store where I live because A, it was outside, and B, they decided that the food was better. And I'm hopeful that could be a new trend.
What do you know about our country, except that we're always going to two extremes at once? So this last year, because Amazon bought Whole Foods, you know, not long before the pandemic, more people did vegetable and fruit shopping, cheese shopping online without ever having felt the product, seen it, or smelled it, just buying it online and having it delivered to our house. So I think there's real risks with that. A lot of farmers markets closed down, but in our community, a lot more people went wild foraging than I've ever seen before. You had a lot of time on your hands. Gardening is up something like 400%. Every seed company in the country had a 5 to 10-fold increase in seed sales. So I think the irony is COVID gave people enough time to garden and forage again. And the great restaurateurs, one of them that left the Southwest and is now the premier chef in St. Louis, is not just calling someone who goes out and contacts farmers as forager. He's out for 2 hours every morning foraging. And I think we're going to see a revival of that because of the authenticity that other people talked about.
Something else we touched on is a little bit of geography. I don't know, Gay, you're based in Flagstaff. And I was wondering, in terms of, I always tell my students, because you're from Tucson doesn't mean you have to start in Tucson. And if we look at the big three, Tucson, Phoenix, and Flagstaff, are there more opportunities perhaps in one market, or what sort of things should we be paying attention to if we're thinking about launching?
In terms of marketing?
In terms of geography, yeah.
Or geography. Well, of course, in Arizona, it's interesting because, you know, you can drive 10 miles and be at a 2,000 foot elevation difference. So, you know, it's a whole other landscape about what you can forage, what you can grow, and for how long. And I think I live now in the Verde Valley area, so there's a lot more food production down there and year round. Flagstaff is a tough place. It's hard to grow things up there. And, you know, when the original homesteaders moved out there, and when was it, 1890, most of them went belly up. The ranchers survived because that was what the landscape could manage. I think landscape has a lot to do with food production. And, you know, I don't think Arizona is, it has pockets, it has places where it's good. And then there's a lot of wildlands where it's more about foraging. I don't know, does that answer your question?
I was wondering, would you say Flagstaff is a tougher market than Tucson if you were going to get into the food space?
Well, Derrick, are you here? Derrick nailed it with the hamburgers, you know. growing fruit up there. It's about every 7 years that you get a good crop of apricots or apples in Flagstaff. The Verde Valley at, 4,000.
But they have great snow cones.
Yeah. That's true. Awesome. Well, pine nuts, you get pine nuts every 7 years too. Yeah, Verde Valley, I think the 4,000-foot elevation, 4,000 or 5,000 feet is optimal. So like the Prescott, Chino Valley area, Prescott, they have much higher food production possibilities.
I want to flip it, though. I entirely agree with you and some of the sentiments Derrick offered, but per capita, Flagstaff has twice the restaurant visitation of any other city of its size in the Southwest. Why? Because there's millions of people visiting the Grand Canyon each year. We stop in Flagstaff and say, I want a taste of this place. We had how many restaurants that were doing innovative things come into Tucson, and a lot of them were also in Flagstaff or Phoenix and failed utterly because we don't have that pull for at least 9 months of the year. If we could just have restaurants open during the Gem and Mineral Show, everything would be great. But the point is that Flagstaff does have that advantage. That you have, like my brother, the first time he came to the Grand Canyon, and he said at the El Tovar, what do you have as a special on the menu today? And he lives on the Virginia coast of Chesapeake Bay. The waitress said, Chesapeake Bay, Maryland crab cakes. And he said, and why in the freaking hell did I come to Arizona if I could have that at home? And how can it be as good here as it is there? And so the thing is that it's not just a marketing ploy in the broad sense that people want to taste place, but it really is something that integrates us. The dialogue that nearly every one of our speakers talked about between food producer and chef or caterer or value-added product producer is absolutely essential to this. And I think we have to get smart in Tucson and really support the innovators more than we have. And the bottleneck is that we still have a higher rate of poverty than Flagstaff in Tucson. One of my friends at U of A said the average family in Tucson can't afford a meal more than $12 for that meal more than one time a week. Well, a damn Happy Meal or a Burger King special is $12 to $14. So the poverty here is something that we have to deal with, or a lot of our aspirations are going to fall by the wayside because 2/3 to 3/4 of Tucson can't afford good, healthy food the way we're positioning it now.
Well, Patty Inich just did a program, a special about the borderlands, about food, only she went to Texas and it was paid for by Visit El Paso Tourist Agency. And it was a good program. She's very popular. So we need to get her to come to Arizona and visit.
My hope is that we continue to be an incubator for innovation that relates to us being in the desert, because more of the world is facing desert-like conditions, and we're the laboratory for the future. With 1/3 of the Colorado River water going out the window, 500,000 gallons of water that used to go to Pinell County just north of us gone. With the water rationing in the last 6 weeks, we need to figure out how to grow food and celebrate great food on less water. And if we do that, we'll be the leader rather than back with Mississippi and the statistics for our our economy and our education level and other demographic factors. And I think we have to take the challenge that's before us with climate change and say, there are solutions that over the last 5,000 years, farmers and chefs and cooks have done, sun drying things and all of that make perfect sense for the future here. And if we do that, people will flock to Tucson to see how to do it in the rest of the world.
And should local food establishments also use this climate change argument in terms of support us because we're more climate change?
The little publication that we just gave out, that was a collaboration of Extension and many other things, said, what's good for your body is good for the planet. That we have foods that meet both of those criteria, and that's something to celebrate. And so I think we can do that. It's not pitting our, climate change doesn't mean that we should eat a crappy, dull diet because we've lost our options. It means we have to get smart and valuing the fragrant, flavorful things that are right at our doorstep.
Thank you. And what resources are available for would-be food entrepreneurs in Tucson if they're looking to get something going?
In Tucson?
In Tucson, yeah.
The YMCA Business Incubator, YWCA Business Incubator has helped a lot of small entrepreneurs. The City of Gastronomy certification program and the other trainings have been a boon. Most Tucsonans are off Twitter, but on Fritter, things like that.
Yeah, in Phoenix, the Pinnacle Prevention has done a lot to for innovators in local community gardens and so forth.
And we have the best food bank in the country that has all kinds of innovative programs.
I'm going to put one of our audience members on the spot. Channing from Startup Tucson, would you please take the mic and tell us about what are the resources for food entrepreneurs that Startup Tucson is providing? And there's something about a very large USDA grant.
Yeah, so thank you. I was listening to you talk about the resources available for food entrepreneurs, and I was like, oh my gosh, us too. So last year we got a USDA Farmers Market Promotion Grant, and we've been using that to develop the Food Forward programs, which include building free websites for local food businesses, running a food accelerator. We have 2 cohorts. The first one we're about halfway through right now, and the next one we'll be running next summer. And then we also are working with Visit Tucson to build a virtual tour of gastronomy, which will kind of start out as a directory of all the local food businesses here, everything from restaurants to farms to chutneys and sauces and all the things that you can eat that are heritage and local. And then we also are working on developing a framework to spread all of those resources throughout the region into more rural and underserved communities, and also translating into Spanish. So if you're a food business and you want to learn more, come see me. We definitely want to connect with you. We want to hear more about your needs, and we also want to hear more about how we can help you and support you. So Startup Tucson is here too.
Going down.
One of my one of the guest speakers I have in my class is the founder of Dillinger Brewery, and he talks about how the microbreweries in Tucson actually work together, that they cooperate with each other, that they think they see them all, we're all in this together. Let's help each other, and the enemy is Anheuser-Busch and so on, the big players, not. It's a rising tide in terms of more and more of us are switching to local breweries. Do you have any thoughts on that in terms of from a food perspective, perhaps?
Well, I'm a little alarmed about some of the dairy operations that are coming into Arizona and, taking up a lot of the water resources and agricultural land, to feed the cows. And so I think the cooperative effort by small producers to secure their production, corridors is really important. I'm not so familiar with Tucson, how that's going. I know in Phoenix, that's basically a corporate agricultural area, and Yuma and all that. So it's really important for small producers to cooperate, if they can buy collectively or secure, land contracts for their own production. I have no way to measure that at the moment offhand, but that's key to survival. It is a battle. Resources.
And I think we see wonderful collaboration between our winemakers in the state. They're just like a big family for the most part, a little bit of competition on the fringes, but competition and cooperation sometimes are two sides of the coin. They're trying to ramp it up. And I see that in other things. I really see the big stumbling block that our state has always had the poorest support through the state government for the kinds of things that we're talking about here through the Ag Commission. The local foods program is lackluster compared to that of other states. We've lost a lot of the Mexican produce, lost 1,000 jobs in Nogales in the food industry within the last 2 years because we didn't lobby as hard as Florida in the tariff wars. And so until we get a state government that realizes we're in a water crisis, that agriculture is essential to food security, and that we can't keep on shutting all of our water into more subdivisions, we're at a disadvantage compared to New Mexico and California, our closest neighbors. Even Utah has a much more robust food systems program statewide than we do, and we have to demand that our politicians pay attention to the upwelling of grassroots support for the kinds of producers that have just spoken to us.
All right, thank you. I think we have time for a last question. Do you have any final words of advice before we wrap up?
Well, I think this whole gathering here today and the whole series that you have put together, Gary, with the Tucson City of Gastronomy and Jonathan, was very positive. I think the energy is really high here, and that has a way of spreading around the community and inspiring other people. And it all starts down at the grassroots level. That's how we get things done.
And most innovation does begin on the margins, and we've seen that with the stories today. And I just have to say my gratitude. So many people in this region have not just changed what I eat, but have changed my life and way of thinking about things. We just have remarkable innovators in this state and in this room, and I'm just so grateful to hear this kind of dialogue.
All right, thank you. And should we take some questions, Jonathan?
Yes, so first, how about we give a hand to our panelists and moderator. Terrific session. Please stay up here because we're going to immediately go into a Q&A session, and we're going to take questions both from the live audience and from the online audience. And I'm going to walk around the microphone. Can I give this microphone to Ellen, and you can, you can ask the questions that are being asked online. Well, I'm going to start. So one of the questions you just addressed, the question was, what are the differences in the opportunities for heritage food producers in the big three? I don't think I've heard that before, but we know what you meant in Arizona. And Gay, you had some very interesting observations about the different landscapes and how the food production is so different in these different regions. But what about the entrepreneurial ecosystems in those places? So what are your observations and predictions about where things are going in terms of those entrepreneurial ecosystems in Tucson and Phoenix and Flagstaff and Arizona in general?
Wow, I don't think I can speak to Tucson because I don't live here. And Flagstaff, well, I think that the opportunities up there really have to do with grazing animals more than any kind of crop production, unless it's a greenhouse.
Food products.
situation.
Somebody's thinking about starting a food business that's going to produce not necessarily growing it themselves, but taking those ingredients and making products and putting them on the market.
Well, I had always sort of thought of it would be good to buy the churro lamb from the Navajo sheep herders and create sausages. I did a trial with that once at a Sheep is Life event on the Navajo Nation, and everybody loved the sausage. But you know, the meat processing is very complicated, and it's hard to manage that. So no one's done that. With that, in the Verde Valley, however, we have a new malt facility going in, and we've got local corn farmers transitioning to barley, which is a lower water use crop, and that's very positive. So they're creating malt, which all the breweries around the state are buying now. So that's a very positive development. It helps save water in the Verde River and the whole watershed. There are opportunities like that, transitioning away from high water use crops to a product that can have added value, like the barley malt.
Yeah,
Question to Gary.
I just want to piggyback on one thing that Gay mentioned, and that's that a lot of times high value products like malting or the microbreweries are actually the ways how producers ramp up their production. In other words, at first I thought we'd see white Sonora wheat and all our tortillas and breads and stuff, and it was the brewers, about 15 breweries, microbreweries, and the caterers that do a lot of pastry chef preparations that got it over the hurdle in scale to the next level. And I never understood that before. Of course, yeah, a brewer can pay more for $1 or a ton of wheat or barley than a pizza chef. That Chris Bianco still stuck with Utah flour while he had the white Sonora wheat mill in his backyard wasn't a contradiction. It was just a thing of scale. So I think that Tucson has some unique things of having the land grant university here that has resources like your school, and a great food bank and a great 100-year history of having native plants as part of our identities. Native plant landscaping in the Southwest began in Tucson, spread to New Mexico and Texas and Southern California. And that's still part of who we are. You don't have to talk someone into wanting to try prickly pear or cholla buds like you would someplace else. So I think there's advantages that way. The deep context of the Native American communities around Flagstaff really gives its advantage of keeping those things in the restaurants like La Posada and Winslow and all of that. And then Phoenix has absolutely great chefs and restaurants, and very few of them last more than 5 years. The turnover there and the changes in fashion and who gets PR and all of that are just devastating to some of the best chefs. So in ways we have a little bit more stability, not much, but that Phoenix has incredible, shining stars, but they're like shooting stars that blaze out quickly too.
So what could we be doing better to support people that are thinking about getting into this heritage food space as a business? What can we do better to support them?
Well, I guess the social media is the new way of spreading the word. You know, old fashioned people like myself write food articles. And then magazines like, you know, the Edible series, they advertise and promote small producers. I think farmers markets, I guess they're going, you said they're scaling down, but you know, we used to be able to give tastes at farmers markets so that small producers could go and share their wares with, you know, the 500 or so people that pass through the market on that day. I don't know if that's going to come back or not, but that was one way. And, you know, food fairs, festivals, Tucson Meet Yourself. Is that not, that's a good.
No, that was last week and
Yeah,
it was back to normal, almost.
But that has a lot of opportunity, right? To
Yeah.
showcase small vendors.
Jonathan, do you know how many of the food festivals that started up since the City of Gastronomy had to close down for COVID, or isn't that clear?
How many started since the designation, or how many?
I know you were tracking the increased number of food and beverage festivals we had here, but did they take a hit with COVID?
Well, they're just starting back up again in the last couple of months, really. But we see a number of our annual food and drink festivals getting back on the calendar. And that's great to see because we have so many here. Just in the Metro Tucson area, we have 65 annual food and drink festivals before the pandemic started. And there were 13 new annual culinary festivals started up after our UNESCO City of Gastronomy designation. So the trend was definitely upward, and we're starting to see them come back, but time will tell. I'm going to take advantage of some people in the audience here, sort of a captive audience here. So we've got two of our top chefs in Tucson, and I want to ask them, what do they see as the trends in heritage foods in your realms?
Well, what's interesting about it is, you know, all the chefs in Southern Arizona right now, we get all the same products when they're seasonal. So we get to see what each chef's doing separately. One thing that I've noticed a lot is more modern techniques being done with certain ingredients. So sous vide is very popular, being able to kind of slow cook, making foams, just different approaches to kind of the traditional ingredients. It's unique and just exciting and really gets people involved in the food.
Let's take it a little bit differently, because I'm moving away from the serving the public piece, and I'm beginning to take a look at, and really this goes back to the work that Gary has done forever and continues to do. It's not necessarily look at the foods here as heritage foods, but the foods of the future. Because as we were talking, as Gary, you were talking a few moments ago about climate change, we've lived with climate change. We lived for 5,000 years with the climate that much more of the world is going to have to cope with. So when you started Native Seed Search and the formative work that you did then, I don't know if you realized it at the time. You probably did, because you're such a smart guy, but we do have the foods of the future here. We are the future. And so that is sort of where I want to spend more of my time, is trying to figure out how to make that transition from heritage because it's cool and great, but how to allow more people to be able to eat those foods because they're going to need to eat them, and how to popularize them in that way, rather than only as a culinary treat, but as sustenance.
If I could piggyback off that, Jonathan, quickly, the trap with heritage foods is it's kind of retro. And it can be romanticized, reified, and sort of made nostalgia. And what Janos just said is flipping it so people see this as new opportunities, new challenges, and an exciting adventure.
And it's going to be a good thing that we've been trying to preserve our food biodiversity here in the desert, because we may need some of those varieties that are already desert, drought adapted as our foods of the future.
As one of our slow food colleagues used to say, you've got to eat it to save it. And we need to eat it to save it so that we have it for the future.
Yeah, I think part of it is identity, and heritage foods does sound fairly retro, but trying to make it as an identity of, this is Arizona's food. It's not just a old fashioned food or something like this. And with so many people moving into Arizona, especially Tucson, they want to know what is it to be an Arizonan? What is it to be a Tucsonian?
We need to make heritage foods less retro and more cool. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to put another chef on the spot. Same question to you, Derrick. What do you see as the trends in Arizona's heritage foods, and is there a bright future for them? And are there some interesting trends that you're seeing?
Sure, thanks. I think a number of people, I think what Janos is saying is spot on. The ranchers that I work with have always talked about the fact that they have been, for generations, learning how to grow food in arid landscapes, and that more and more of the world is going to be dealing with that same reality. But you asked a question before that I wanted to attempt to answer, which is what can we do? What can you do? What can the schools do? And all the ranchers and farmers that I talk to, they're all dealing with a fundamental problem that we hardly ever talk about, which is the problem of succession. Who's going to run the ranch when they can't run it anymore? Who's going to work the farm? And I think as a land grant university, as a powerhouse in this landscape, if U of A and the people in this room who care about this sort of thing can figure out how to get young people excited about farming and excited about ranching, and understand that in a world of apps and social media and startups, et cetera, that food and growing food for tomorrow is power, and a power that they might not encounter in the digital realm. I think if we can do practical things to incentivize young people to go out to you guys and learn how to farm and take those practices and proliferate them in this landscape, I think that could really be enormously beneficial. And it seems to me that this school is situated to affect that support better than any other entity.
Does anybody else here have okay, we have a question down from the online audience.
That's right. So Mark Lewis online says there's a catch-22 in Phoenix. Chefs don't know all of the wild foraged ingredients and don't want to be seen not knowing about them or learning about them. This more than anything holds them back from using those foraged foods. So Gay or Gary, are there opportunities in that area for learning about those kinds of things, or what would you recommend to those chefs?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of turnover, people coming into Phoenix and trying to get to know things, but there's some great farmers and organizations like Desert Botanical Garden that can help with that kind of education, just like Desert Survivors and Mission Gardens helps us here. It's a different mix, but I just think that, where we can step out to Tumamoc Hill and have sea desert plants within 2 miles of the campus, the Papago Park and the other open lands might offer opportunities like that, but people aren't taking advantage of them as much. And I just think Phoenix has a lot of permaculture people, probably more than Tucson too. So it's really easy to sit in Tucson and disparage Phoenix. And I really think it's just that there's a lot of higher proportion of people in Phoenix are new, and because Phoenix itself is, not a 5,000-year-old city like Tucson, we're probably more in touch with our heritage, but there's just a lot of great opportunities up there. So I don't think it lacks opportunities, or the people up there should be disparaged.
I think the foraging part, beyond mushrooms, or considerable education related to that too, but you have to know when to forage them, because not all of the wild foods are edible at all the different stages of their existence. And, you have to know how to cook them or dry them. There's education involved. And I know Mark Lewis does a great job with that. He's one person. There has to be an interest in that, and maybe that interest is related to hunger and the availability of, the kind of easy foods that we're so accustomed to. Wild foods, some people I've heard refer to them as famine foods. So I think it takes a little learning about culture and what's out there and how to do it before that's going to catch on. And plus, for commercial purposes, you have to have a license to harvest wild foods, if you're going to resell them or serve them in a restaurant.
I'm going to put Mark Peterson on the spot here. You see a lot of young people every day in your classrooms, and you're teaching, business principles, principles of starting up businesses. Do you see a significant level of interest among young people in starting food businesses, whether it's farming or products or any other kind of business?
What we always joke about is we see nonstop bar apps and parking apps. So food definitely is going to come in maybe in 5th place or 6th place, I would say. There's more. It's all more technology based, or they're thinking about probably maybe an easier option, which would not be food. But yeah, we of course there are some. We have had quite a few students come up with food-based ideas, and I was thinking about the geography, because usually it is they want to start in the city they're most familiar with. So it's in Tucson, and they talk about we're going to open up on University Avenue, and they haven't really thought about, well, is there space there, and what are the rents there, and can you make money? Actually, one of the student groups I have this semester wants to open a cereal bar. Literally, you'd go in there and I guess get a bowl of Frosted Flakes. And I have to say that's the group I'm most concerned about in terms of being able to make money. But
there was already that restaurant concept on University Boulevard.
So I'm not from Tucson, so they put one over me then maybe, I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, I was actually headed your way, Alyssa. I wanted to hear your thoughts.
Well, I'm obsessed with food. So in the classes that we teach at McGuire, I always hone in on the students who are also obsessed with food. And Mark, you'll have to help me with the name of these groups, but there was, I think it was even 2nd place. We have an annual competition. The 2nd place team was coordinating with the College of Agriculture. It was an interdisciplinary student team from the new venture development program, and they were growing hothouse vegetable CSAs. So using closed systems ag to provide low cost cucumbers, tomatoes, peppers. Again, they got second place, which was really awesome, sort of showcasing the coming together of the student-based knowledge and also the resources that the university has and should certainly use to help propel this kind of new generation of innovators. And there was also a really cool student group that was into closed systems mushroom growing, culinary mushrooms, and they were coordinating with the chef at Feast, who actually, I don't know if he still has one of their prototypes, but it kind of looks like a sort of personal wine cooler. That's like what the look of it is. And Feast thought it was really cool because you could come in there as a consumer eating in the restaurant and see like lion's mane mushrooms growing. And I think they were also doing oyster mushrooms. So again, I think because I really am obsessed with food, I would always hone in on the students who were obsessed as well. And just to share one more story, Jonathan and I got to collaborate with a social innovation organizations class, and the students did case studies on regional food branding programs from across the country, and they were able to share those insights with the organization. And kind of, I mean, Jonathan was light years ahead in terms of the branding and the food artisan certification, but it's been fun to be able to, you know, get the students involved. I think especially, you know, because we are a land grant institution and we have this focus on ag, to be able to make that connection with business is an opportunity that I think can continue to be explored. I'll pass this back to you.
Thank you. Does anybody in the live audience have a question? And I hear that we don't have any questions currently with the online audience. So I want to say thank you to all of the presenters, all of the moderators. I want to say thank you to Carlos and Ellen, who really made it happen in terms of logistics. And I want to thank everybody that registered and showed up in person and online. And please keep an eye out for a follow-up email where we're going to ask you for some feedback, because we're going to keep doing these workshops. And we see that there's a big demand, a high interest level in this entrepreneurial food space. So Tucson City of Gastronomy is going to continue to partner with the McGuire Center for Entrepreneurship and the Southwest Center. And I look forward to seeing some of you in person. Attend any way you want, but I'd love to see you in person as things get better. So thank you for coming today, and give a big hand to our presenters.